Chapter 1348. To be honest, even Yi Guchen, a bystander, felt sorry for Duan Tianfeng, let alone Duan Tianfeng himself. The beauty he had been longing for was treating him like this. Anyone else would not be able to accept it. Yi Guchen could not stand Duan Tianfeng being treated like this. Therefore he stood out. Nangong Huajing raised her eyebrows at Yi Guchen's words. In the past, Nangong Huajing would not even bother to speak to such a junior. But now, Yi Guchen was no longer a nobody. Nangong Huajing glanced at Yi Guchen and said, "Yi Guchen, I know you have performed well in the Holy Imperial Universe. But this is the selection of the future master of the artifact sect. It is a competition of forging, not martial strength." Xiao Gongshu also shook his head and smiled. Maybe Duan Tianfeng wants revenge so badly that he's resorting to any method. Even Gu Beihan, the sect master of the artifact sect, looked at Yi Guchen in confusion. He had never heard that Yi Guchen had challenged the path of heavenly works. Nangong Jueyun said coldly, "If you have not challenged the path of heavenly works and you don't even have a forger's token, what right do you have to become a disciple of the artifact sect and participate in the selection of the future master?" Most of the people present had the same thought as Nangong Jueyun. If it was a competition of martial strength, they had nothing to say. Yi Guchen was definitely the best. But this was a competition of forging. The corners of Yi Guchen's lips curled up into a sneer when he saw that everyone was talking about him. He faintly took out a token and said coldly, "Open your dog eyes and take a good look. What is this?" His words silenced the entire place. Everyone's eyes landed on the token in unison. When they saw the 6 dazzling golden stars on the token, everyone almost stopped breathing. They were dumbfounded and their minds were buzzing. Am I seeing things? A 6-star forger's token? Is that Yi Guchen's own token? Could it be that the mysterious 6-star forging genius from the heavenly arts path a few days ago is Yi Guchen? How is that possible? You must be kidding me. Everyone was shocked. The whole place was in an uproar. Some people's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. It wasn't that they didn't dare to believe Yi Guchen, but it was just too unbelievable. That was a 6-star blacksmith's token, not a 1-star or 2-star token. Furthermore, Yi Guchen was a sword cultivator who specialized in the way of the sword. He was not a professional artificer. To Yi Guchen, forging was, at most, a side job. However, even his side job had surpassed many professional blacksmiths who had studied blacksmithing since childhood. This was the most unbelievable part. Where did this token come from? Nangong Ju-yun's expression froze. What do you think? Don't tell me you haven't heard the news from a few days ago? Yi Guchen said calmly. That mysterious 6-star forging genius is actually you? Nangong Ju-yun's body trembled. Even with his shrewdness, he couldn't help but change his expression at this moment. A 6-star forging master was not an identity that could be ignored. What? You're a 6-star forging master? Nangong Huajing's delicate body also trembled. This was a situation that she absolutely didn't expect. Xiao Gongshu also stared at the token in Yi Guchen's hand, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. On the other side, Gu Beihan and Gu Xiangling's hearts also shook. They didn't know that Yi Guchen had passed the heavenly arts path and obtained a 6-star forging master's token. A 6-star forging master. It turns out that I still underestimated young Master Yi. Gu Xiangling's beautiful eyes trembled. She too was deeply shocked. When she thought of how worried she was about Yi Guchen, it now seemed so laughable. Yi Guchen's forging skills were even stronger than her, the daughter of the divine artifact sect master. Great Elder Yang Qi knew about it, so he wasn't too surprised. On the contrary, Song Feichen's entire body stiffened. His face was pale and his mind was buzzing. Yi Guchen is a 6-star forging master? How is this possible? Song Feichen couldn't believe it, and his eyes were fixed on the forging master's token. However, he actually knew that Yi Guchen wouldn't lie in front of everyone. Song Feichen just couldn't accept it. His only sense of superiority before was that he could suppress Yi Guchen in the path of forging. However, this sense of superiority was now shattered in front of the 6-star forging master's token. No, So what if he's a 6-star forging master? The heavenly arts path is only a one-sided test, and it can't completely represent one's forging skills. In this line, experience is the most important. I don't believe that Yi Guchen's experience can surpass mine. Song Feichen secretly gritted his teeth. He had already been suppressed by Nangong Jueyun before. How could he be willing to be suppressed by Yi Guchen now? After Yi Guchen took out the token, Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Huajing were completely speechless. What else could they say? Since Yi Guchen had already obtained the 6-star forging master's token, according to the rules, not to mention becoming a disciple of the Divine Tools sect. Even if he wanted to become a deacon or even an elder, it would not be impossible for him to do so. Gu Beihan took a deep breath and said, Duan Tianfeng, this good disciple of yours is too unexpected. Gu Beihan couldn't help but sigh. Previously, he thought that even if Yi Guchen came to the heavenly arts path, it wouldn't be too significant, and it wouldn't affect the result of the junior sect master selection. However, it seemed that it was not impossible. Gu Xiangling's beautiful eyes flashed with a strange light. A glimmer of hope rose in her heart again. Gu Xiangling didn't have high hopes for Song Feichen because she knew him very well. Nangong Jueyun's forging skills were definitely better than Song Feichen's. However, Gu Xiangling also couldn't see through Yi Guchen. She felt that he was unfathomable. If Yi Guchen can refine the Daluo Void Incineration Flame, his forging ability will probably rise to another level. Unfortunately, it will be difficult to refine the Daluo Void Incineration Flame in just a few days. Gu Xiangling shook her head secretly, feeling that it was a pity. If Yi Guchen could obtain the Origin Void Incineration Flame earlier, he might have enough time to prepare to refine it. I wonder if I'm still qualified to participate in the junior sect master selection now? Yi Guchen said with a hint of playfulness as he glanced at Nangong Huajing, Nangong Jueyun, and the others. Nangong Huajing didn't say a word, while Nangong Jueyun's face was gloomy. Of course you're qualified. Gu Beihan smiled faintly. He didn't want to see Nangong Jueyun win the junior sect master position. Therefore, he was naturally happy to see Yi Guchen coming out to deal with Nangong Jueyun. That's enough. Yi Guchen nodded slightly. All right, there's no time to lose. Let the junior sect master selection begin, Gu Beihan said. At this moment, Yi Guchen's eyes flashed as he looked at Nangong Jueyun. Before the junior sect master selection begins, shouldn't you settle Nangong Yuan's IOU? The moment Yi Guchen said that, Nangong Jueyun's face instantly turned gloomy. Chapter 1349. Before Nangong Jueyun and Yi Guchen met, there was already a grudge between them because of Nangong Yuan. Yi Guchen asking Nangong Yuan to write an IOU was not only a slap to Nangong Jueyun's face, but it was also a slap to the Nangong noble's face. Yi Guchen did not care about this. After all, he had already offended a few overlord forces and there was no point in having too many debts. Even if Yi Guchen did not want to offend Nangong Jueyun, with the grudge between Xiao Gongshu and Duan Tianfeng, it was impossible for him to get along with Nangong Jueyun. They were destined to be enemies. Since they were destined to be enemies, what was Yi Guchen afraid of? There was no need for him to care about the Nangong nobles. Yi Guchen took out the IOU written by Nangong Yuan. It was written clearly in black and white. Moreover, many people had witnessed Nangong Yuan writing the IOU that day at the Thousand Treasures house. Therefore, Yi Guchen was not afraid that Nangong Jueyun would not admit it. 30 million heaven crystals. I believe that with the Nangong Nobles Foundation, you can take it out, right? Yi Guchen smiled faintly. Nangong Jueyun's face turned pale. He had always been shrewd. However, because of Yi Guchen, he had lost his composure time and time again. He could not maintain his composure. 30 million heaven crystals might not be much to the Nangong nobles. However, to Nangong Jueyun, it was not a small number. Not to mention that he had just taken out 20 million heaven crystals for Nangong Yuan to buy materials for him. However, the 20 million heaven crystals had gone down the drain and he still owed 30 million heaven crystals. As for reneging on the debt, with Nangong Jueyun's status, everyone would laugh their heads off if he reneged on the debt. Nangong Jueyun himself could not afford to lose face. Yi Guchen, Don't go overboard. Nangong Huajing frowned slightly. In her opinion, Yi Guchen's actions were too arrogant. He actually dared to ask the Nangong nobles to return the money. This was not glorious for the Nangong nobles. It's written clearly in black and white. How is that overboard? Yi Guchen sneered. Nangong Huajing turned to Duan Tianfeng and said, Senior brother Duan, you should also control your disciple and tell him not to go overboard. Duan Tianfeng didn't say anything, but his heart had already turned cold. Nangong Huajing's attitude made Duan Tianfeng feel disheartened. What was the point of gambling for Nangong Huajing when he was young and impulsive? Seeing that Duan Tianfeng did not speak, Nangong Huajing's jade-like face stiffened slightly as she said, Senior brother Duan, you could not beat Gong Shu back then. Your disciple will definitely not be able to beat Zhu Yun now. While there is still room for negotiation, you should stop. It's useless for you to seek revenge. Why don't you just retire into the mountains? Nangong Huajing's well-meaning advice caused Mo Tianfeng to clench his fists tightly. The meaning of his words was, back then, Mo Tianfeng couldn't beat Elder Shao and lost. Now, his disciple was destined to not be able to defeat Nangong Zhu Yun. I really don't understand why Senior Duan Tianfeng took a fancy to you back then. Yi Guchen's cold words caused the entire place to fall dead silent. They had never thought that Yi Guchen would actually dare to point his spear at Nangong Huajing. Nangong Huajing was now considered an upper echelon of the Nangong family. Yi Guchen, don't think that you can be fearless just because you have the support of the Sword Dynasty and the protection of a saint ruler. Nangong Huajing's eyes were filled with malice as her delicate temperament instantly turned sharp. Yi Guchen chuckled softly. He had faced countless threats along the way, so he naturally wouldn't care about Nangong Huajing's words. He turned to look at Nangong Zhu Yun and said, Nangong Zhu Yun, if you want to go back on your words, just say it. These 30 million heaven crystals are not necessary to me. Yi Guchen's move was to retreat in order to advance. Nangong Zhu Yun took a deep breath and turned to Nangong Huajing. I wonder if you can lend me 30 million heaven crystals? Nangong Zhu Yun would rather lend the money to Yi Guchen than go back on his words. It wasn't that he was honest and trustworthy, but it was because of his face. If there was no one else around, Nangong Zhu Yun would probably not be able to hold himself back and directly kill Yi Guchen. Although Nangong Huajing's expression was ugly, she still gave Nangong Zhu Yun 30 million heaven crystals. Nangong Zhu Yun's expression was cold as he tossed 3 crystal cards to Yi Guchen. The Nangong family is indeed honest and trustworthy. Yi Guchen accepted the cards with a faint smile. Nangong Zhu Yun and Nangong Huajing's faces turned slightly pale. Yi Guchen, thank you. Duan Tianfeng sighed from the side. He knew that Yi Guchen wanted to avenge him. Senior Duan Tianfeng, don't worry. I'll let Nangong Huajing know that she was blind not to have chosen you back then. Yi Guchen said coldly. He didn't lower his voice when he said this, so everyone present heard him. Nangong Huajing was so angry that her body trembled. She shouted coldly, I, Nangong Huajing, will never regret my choice back then. Although I respect Senior Duan, a loss is a loss. That's the truth. Xiao Gongshu also said with a cold face, a battle of words is meaningless. This time, let our disciples compete. All right, let's bet on this. Duan Tianfeng puffed out his chest and became firm. To be honest, he still did not understand why he lost to Xiao Gongxing back then. However, this time, he had full confidence in Yi Guchen. All right, since your matter is settled, let's officially begin the young sect master selection. Gu Beihan said. Next, the young sect master selection officially began. As Yi Guchen had a 6-star blacksmith master token, he could participate without a doubt. The young sect master selection was divided into 3 rounds. The first round was to forge supreme-grade spiritual inscriptions divine weapons. The second round was to forge mystical inscriptions divine weapons and determine the top 10 based on the quality of their divine weapons. The last round was held in the Heavenly Cauldron. The 10 blacksmiths who could reach this round could give their all to forge the strongest weapon within their capabilities. However, under normal circumstances, the younger generation of blacksmiths could only forge mystical inscriptions, divine weapons. Even the most outstanding disciples could only forge supreme-grade mystical inscriptions, divine weapons. Only deacon elders could forge quasi-heavenly tribulation divine weapons. As for true heavenly tribulation divine weapons, only people like Gu Beihan, Yang Qi, Shao Gongxing, and Duan Tianfeng could forge them. Therefore, in the eyes of many in this round, those who could forge supreme-grade mystical inscriptions divine weapons would be able to come out on top. The first round officially begins. An elder of the Divine Artifact sect announced. The entire square was divided into different arenas for the participants to forge their weapons. As long as they could forge supreme-grade spiritual inscriptions divine weapons, they would pass the round. Yi Guchen also began to forge. He raised his hand, and the pitch-black demonic heart flame rose into the air. At this level of forging, there was no need for the Daluo void incineration flame. With the quality of the heart demon flame, it was enough to deal with it. Gu Xiangling also participated. She stretched out her jade-like hand and an ocean blue flame spread out. It was the unique flame of heaven and earth that she possessed, the ocean blue water flame. Song Feichen also summoned his own unique flame of heaven and earth, the volcanic rock flame. Last was Nangong Juin. Surprisingly, he did not summon any unique flames of heaven and earth. Instead, he used his true qi to create flames and began forging. Is he trying to show off? Some of the spectators muttered inwardly. Chapter 1350. Natural flames were a powerful weapon for blacksmiths. All the blacksmiths who possessed heaven and earth unique flames would rush forward at this moment. However, Nangong Juyin didn't use it. Instead, he used his true qi to control the flames. In the eyes of the spectators, this was clearly a disdain for his competitors. I heard that Nangong Juyin has 2 types of supreme natural flames and can control them with ease. I really want to see it for myself. Many people looked interested. But I heard that Yi Guchen obtained a supreme natural flame, the origin void incineration flame, in the Myriad Treasures house. Why isn't he using it? Someone asked doubtfully. Are you joking? How can a supreme natural flame like that be refined in a few days? That's true. I didn't think of that. Many people's eyes were focused on Yi Guchen. They were discussing among themselves. The most interesting part of this junior sect master selection was naturally the competition between Nangong Juyin and Yi Guchen. Song Feichen, the senior brother of Divine Artifact sect, who had been the talk of the town, didn't receive much attention. Song Feichen's face was stiff and gloomy as he looked at the two in the limelight. As the senior brother of Divine Artifact sect, he should be the center of attention, but no one was paying attention to him now. Even Gu Xiangling was secretly paying attention to the competition between Yi Guchen and Nangong Juyin. Just you wait. I, Song Feichen, will give everyone a surprise in the 3rd round, Song Feichen said angrily. On the other side, Yi Guchen had also begun to forge. The first round's requirement was to forge a supreme spiritual weapon. This was no pressure for Yi Guchen at all. He chose the materials, smelted, forged, and polished them in one go. Many elders of Divine Artifact sect were slightly surprised by his skillful movements. Tikisuke, I didn't expect Yi Guchen to be so skilled in the art of forging. That's right. That Yi Guchen is really a monster. He has such a monstrous talent in the way of the sword, but I didn't expect him to be so proficient in the way of forging. He has the air of a grandmaster. It seems like Duan Tianfeng has a good eye. I wonder if he will be able to avenge himself with Yi Guchen's help. Some elders of Divine Artifact sect were whispering to each other. They gave Yi Guchen a very high evaluation. It was not only the experts, but even the laymen who did not know much about smithing felt comfortable when they saw Yi Guchen's smithing method. A southern refined saint hand is still a southern refined saint hand. His eyes aren't bad. Many people sighed. Gu Beihan's eyes were also filled with surprise. Yi Guchen's performance had exceeded his expectations. Looks like I've underestimated this Yi Guchen. To be chosen by Tianfeng, he must be quite capable. Gu Beihan muttered to himself. But to be honest, he still did not want Yi Guchen to take first place. Because Yi Guqin was a hot potato. Even if he could defeat Nangong Ju Yun in the end, Divine Artifact Sect would find it difficult to accept Yi Guqin. If they accepted Yi Guqin, Divine Artifact Sect would be pressured by the Celestial God Sword Sect, Starry Sword Pavilion, Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion, Dongfang Family, and other overlords. Even if Divine Artifact Sect had a strong foundation, they would not be able to withstand the combined pressure of several overlords. Sigh, what a pity. Gu Beihan shook his head. Yi Guqin did not pay attention to the clamor of the outside world. Instead, he focused on forging. While Gu Xiangling was forging, she was also paying attention to Yi Guqin out of the corner of her eye. When she saw Yi Guqin's skillful forging, her heart stirred. Yi Guqin is the same as Nangong Ju Yun. I can't see through him, Gu Xiangling thought to herself. Soon, the first round of the competition ended. There were more than 300 blacksmiths participating in the Junior Sect Master Selection. In the end, only 80 blacksmiths managed to forge a supreme-grade spiritual inscription weapon. From this, it could be seen that blacksmiths were not a simple profession that anyone could take up. Yi Guqin had already completed his task. Nangong Ju Yun, Song Feichen, Gu Xiangling, and the others naturally completed their tasks first. Rest for 2 hours. The second round will begin, an elder of Divine Artifact Sect announced. Among the remaining 80 blacksmiths, many of them had serious expressions. Forging a spiritual inscription weapon might not be a big deal to them. However, the difficulty of forging a spiritual inscription weapon was not on the same level as a spiritual inscription weapon. Not to mention that the second round would only select the top 10 blacksmiths. In other words, the higher the quality of the weapon, the higher the chance of being in the top 10. Soon, 2 hours had passed. The second round of the competition began in the square. Yi Guqin was also on high alert for this round. He was not as relaxed as he was in the first round. After all, those who drowned could swim. Yi Guqin would not make such a low-level mistake. He continued to use the Nirvana demonic flame and began the second round of the competition. Gu Xiangling and Song Feichen also became more serious as they began to forge carefully. On the other hand, Nangong Ju Yun did not use his special flame. Instead, he used his vital energy to control the flame. Everyone knew that the effect of using vital energy to control the flame was far inferior to that of the special flame. Isn't Nangong Ju Yun too confident? Nonsense. Isn't he confident that he can become one of the top 10 young masters? I'm just afraid that he will fail miserably. Don't worry. Isn't young Master Nangong smarter than you? Nangong Ju Yun's attitude caused a commotion. Xiao Gongshu's expression did not change. He seemed to be very confident in his disciple. Nangong Huajing also thought highly of her prodigy. She looked at Yi Guqin and shook her head. Yi Guqin has already shown all his skills in the previous 2 rounds. This is the only special flame in the world. Although the quality is good, it is not enough to determine the outcome of the competition. There is no suspense in the competition between the young master and the young master. Nangong Huajing analyzed in her heart. She naturally hoped that her prodigy could obtain the position of young master. On the other side, Duan Tianfeng's expression was also very calm. Everyone thought that Yi Guqin had already shown many tricks up his sleeve. However, they did not know that what they saw was only the tip of the iceberg for Yi Guqin. The Daoyuo Void Incineration Flame. The Taboo Forging Technique. The Sword Refinement Technique. The Sword Refinement Technique. Any one of these 2 was enough to shock everyone and determine the outcome of the competition. Especially the Taboo Forging Technique. It was a forging technique that even a Grandmaster Forging Master like Gu Beihan did not dare to try. After a few days, Yi Guqin finally completed his forging. A long sword that was as clear as crystal landed in Yi Guqin's hand. This was a sword that Yi Guqin had forged using rare materials such as 10,000-year mica. It was called the Cloud Sunbow Sword. The entire sword was slender and clear. It emitted a cold light and had a wisp of spirituality. This sword was also extremely light. Just like its name, it was as ethereal as clouds. When the sword was forged by Yi Guqin, the eyes of many old blacksmiths present lit up. They could all see that this sword was extremely exquisite. Many female martial artists' eyes also lit up. They were indeed very fond of such an exquisite and slender sword aura. Gu Xiangling's beautiful eyes also lit up slightly. Chapter 1351. Gu Xiangling had also forged her own divine weapon, and it was of decent quality. However, all her attention was on the Yunni sword in Yi Guqin's hand. She had to admit that Yi Guqin's forging skills were superb. Under the illumination of the light, the exquisite Yunni sword reflected a dazzling brilliance. Besides, the Yunni sword wasn't just good-looking. It was also of high quality. Some blacksmiths estimated that it was at least a superior-grade Dharma inscription weapon. Song Feichen's divine weapon was also forged, but it didn't look as good as Yi Guqin's. Nangong Juan had also finished forging his divine weapon. Although he didn't use any special flames, the quality of his divine weapon wasn't bad at all. "Let's start the appraisal," an elder of the Divine Artifact sect shouted. The next step was for the elders of the Divine Artifact sect to appraise the divine weapons. Chen Fan, inferior-grade Dharma inscription weapon. Mo Qiu, inferior-grade Dharma inscription weapon. Hao Jian, intermediate-grade Dharma inscription weapon. The elders of the Divine Artifact sect started to appraise the divine weapons one by one. The blacksmiths who had forged inferior-grade and intermediate-grade Dharma inscription weapons looked defeated. They knew that they weren't qualified to enter the top 10. Gu Xiangling, superior-grade Dharma inscription weapon. An elder of the Divine Artifact sect shouted. Immediately, a commotion broke out. She is indeed the daughter of the sect master of the Divine Artifact sect. She has forged superior-grade Dharma inscription weapon at such a young age. Yeah, Gu Xiangling is very capable. She isn't just pretty. Many of the male disciples of Divine Artifact sect were looking at Gu Xiangling with adoration. However, they only exclaimed in their hearts. After all, Gu Xiangling wasn't a woman they could have. Song Feichen, superior-grade Dharma inscription weapon, an elder of the Divine Artifact sect shouted. Another superior-grade Dharma inscription weapon. Looks like Song Feichen can also enter the third round, someone said. Song Feichen's lips curled into a smile. As the senior brother of the Divine Artifact sect, he couldn't embarrass himself. However, before the smile on his face could fully spread, he heard Nangong Juyun's results. Nangong Juyun, a supreme-grade mystical pattern weapon. The elder of the Divine Artifact sect who was reading the results swallowed his saliva before speaking. At this moment, the entire square was in an uproar. It should be known that Nangong Juyun did not use his own unique flames. Instead, he only used the most ordinary vital flames to forge a supreme-grade mystical inscription divine weapon. In everyone's eyes, this was an extremely inconceivable matter. Although Nangong Juyun's expression did not change much when he sensed that everyone was looking at him, he felt a little comfortable in his heart. The unhappiness caused by Yi Guqin seemed to have dissipated. A supreme-grade mystical rune divine weapon. Song Feichen's expression turned slightly ugly. Nangong Juyun was more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. Gu Xiangling's beautiful eyes were also filled with seriousness. However, the elder's eyes lit up when he saw Yi Guqin's cloudbow sword. Even from the perspective of a professional blacksmith, Yi Guqin's weapon was of excellent quality. Yi Guqin, a supreme-grade mystical rune divine weapon. Once this was said, the entire square was in an uproar again. Yi Guqin's weapon is also a supreme-grade mystical rune divine weapon? Don't be too surprised. After all, he's a 6-star blacksmith. A prodigy who takes blacksmithing as a side occupation is actually stronger than Song Feichen and the others from the Divine Artifact sect. However, he can't compare to Nangong Juyun. After all, he didn't use his unique flames. Many discussions could be heard from all directions. Hearing these discussions, Song Feichen's expression turned even uglier. It was as if a layer of soot had been smeared on his face. On the other hand, Nangong Juyun frowned slightly and glanced at Yi Guqin. To be honest, he did not expect Yi Guqin to be able to forge a supreme-grade mystical rune divine weapon. However, when he thought about how he did not use his unique flames, while Yi Guchun did, Nangong Ju-yun was. After this comparison, Nangong Ju-yun still had the upper hand. This Yi Guchun may be a little arrogant, but he does have some ability, Nangong Huajing said calmly. She did not like Yi Guchun's attitude towards the Nangong family. However, at such a young age, Yi Guchun's blacksmithing skills had also reached such a level. Nangong Huajing had to admit that Yi Guchun was quite capable. But that's all there is to it. Even if he can reach the third stage, he can't be compared to Ju-yun. Also, don't forget about the 10,000-year-old fire spirit under the heavenly furnace. Xiao Gongsheng had an expression of victory on his face, appearing extremely calm and composed. That's right. Yi Guchun did not stay in the divine artifact sect for even a day. Naturally, he doesn't know the trick, let alone borrow the power of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. Nangong Huajing shook her head and smiled. In their opinion, Yi Guchun had indeed exceeded their expectations. However, this did not change the outcome of the junior sect master selection. Moreover, there was another reason why Xiao Gongxing was so confident. It was because he had passed on the divine artifact forging technique to Nangong Ju-yun. Alright, after the selection, 10 blacksmiths will participate in the final stage of the forging competition. Nangong Ju-yun, Song Feichen, Gu Xiangling, Yi Guchun, Chu Fan, an elder of the divine artifact sect, called out 10 names in succession. These 10 blacksmiths would participate in the final stage of the forging competition to choose the junior sect master of the divine artifact sect. The presiding elder said in a serious tone, "The third round will begin in 6 hours. Remember, all of you must give it your all in this round and forge the strongest divine weapon within your capabilities. In the end, the most outstanding person will be chosen based on the quality of the divine weapon." Hearing this, Song Feichen and the others were filled with fighting spirit. Nangong Ju-yun was very calm and confident. 10,000-year fire spirit. Yi Guchun muttered to himself. At this moment, Gu Xiangling gracefully walked to Yi Guchun's side. There seemed to be some hesitation and uneasiness on her beautiful face. "What is it, Miss Gu?" Yi Guchun smiled faintly. "That is..." Gu Xiangling blushed slightly and tried to change the topic. Seeing Gu Xiangling's expression, the tens of thousands of spectators in the square had strange expressions. They looked at Nangong Ju-yun, Song Feichen, and the others. Nangong Ju-yun had a dark expression on his face. Although he was only using Gu Xiangling, she was still going to be his fiancée. Any man would find it hard to accept his fiancée showing such an expression in front of another man in public. Song Feichen's face turned the color of a pig's liver. His eyes were filled with jealousy. "Miss Gu, please speak your mind," Yi Guchun said. "Xiangling's words may be a little presumptuous, but the cloud-bow sword that Sir Yi has forged is truly exquisite and beautiful." Chapter 1352. As Gu Xiangling spoke, her jade-like face turned even redder. Actually, with her personality, she would never say such a thing. Moreover, to a blacksmith, the divine weapons they forged were like their own children. They would not give them away so easily. Gu Xiangling could not help but ask because she really liked the cloudy sunbow sword. "You want the cloudy sunbow sword?" Yi Guchun asked. Gu Xiangling lowered her head slightly, looking a little embarrassed. "Take it," Yi Guchun said straightforwardly. "Really?" Gu Xiangling's eyes lit up. She did not expect Yi Guchun to be so generous. In fact, Yi Guchun was not being generous. He did not care about the cloudy sunbow sword at all. He had only forged it casually to pass the second round. Gu Xiangling took the cloudy sunbow sword and wiped it lovingly. She hesitated for a moment, then handed the divine weapon she forged to Yi Guchun. "If you don't mind, this divine weapon can be used as an exchange," Gu Xiangling said gently. Yi Guchun looked at Gu Xiangling, nodded slightly, and accepted the divine weapon. Looking at the two of them exchanging divine weapons, everyone in the square had a strange expression on their faces. Why did it seem like they were exchanging tokens of love? Gu Xiangling seemed to have realized the ambiguity of her actions and immediately retreated with a red face. Yi Guchun did not care about such details. He was already thinking about the third round. Nangong Juoyan's expression was cold as he glanced at Gu Xiangling and Yi Guchen. Song Feichen was burning with jealousy. He wanted to slap Yi Guchen's face in the third round. Gu Beihan's expression turned serious when he saw this. In his opinion, his daughter seemed to think highly of Yi Guchen. Sigh, Xiangling, don't make things difficult for father. Gu Beihan sighed inwardly. No matter what the result was, he could not let Yi Guchen become the young sect master of Divine Weapon Sect. Soon, 6 hours passed. The final match had finally arrived. This was also the most important competition that everyone was looking forward to. It would decide who would become the next master of the Divine Artifact Sect. And that wasn't all. Everyone's gaze swept back and forth between Xiao Gongshu and Duan Tianfeng. Southern Forging Sacred Hands. Beiyan Weapon Emperor. The two most famous 8-star forging grandmasters in the South Horizon region would let their disciples fight again. However, what was rather dramatic was that both of their disciples were actually part of the top 10 young masters. This kind of competition could be said to be a contest where neither side was willing to give an inch. In the beginning, many people thought that Yi Guchen would not be able to beat Nangong Juoyan in terms of smithing. However, after these two matches, everyone knew about Yi Guchen's forging ability. Even if he couldn't defeat Nangong Juoyan, he could at least put up a fight. The 10 people who passed, follow me to Heavenly Furnace. Gu Beihan flung his sleeves and said, "What is this so-called Heavenly Furnace? What kind of existence is the 10,000-year-old fire spirit?" Yi Guchen was curious. To be honest, he was still weaker than Nangong Juoyan and Song Feichen. He didn't understand the Divine Artifact Sect or the so-called Heavenly Furnace. He hadn't even seen the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. Therefore, this was a disadvantage for Yi Guchen. Under Gu Beihan's lead, Yi Guchen and the other 10 people who passed followed closely behind. Yang Qi, Duan Tianfeng, Xiao Gongshu, Nangong Huajing, the other elders of the Divine Artifact Sect, and the tens of thousands of spectators all moved and followed behind. Before long, Gu Beihan led Yi Guchen and the others to the depths of the Divine Artifact Sect. Yi Guchen looked around. The ground was barren and blazing hot, like a desert. On this strange landscape, there was a dark red volcano that was 3,000 meters tall. The entire volcano radiated heat. Thick black smoke rose from the mouth of the volcano. Even from such a distance, everyone could feel the scorching aura emitted by the volcano. Is that volcano the legendary Heavenly Cauldron? Many of the people who followed had only heard of the Heavenly Furnace of the Divine Artifact Sect, but had never seen it with their own eyes. They had thought that the Heavenly Furnace was an enormous cauldron. They hadn't expected the Heavenly Furnace to be a volcano. A long time ago, a fire spirit descended from the heavens and fell into this place, forming this volcano. The founding ancestor of the Divine Artifact Sect found this place and established the Divine Artifact Sect here, making it the holy land of artificers. Today, I hope that every one of you will do your best and not bring shame to the name of the Divine Artifact Sect. Gu Beihan's voice was grand and carried a hint of sincerity. All of the elders of the Divine Artifact Sect wore solemn expressions. Even Duan Tianfeng, who had left the Divine Artifact Sect for a long time, straightened his back and looked a little emotional. The Divine Artifact Sect was the holy land in the hearts of the artificers of the South Horizon region. It was equivalent to the status of the Sword Dynasty in the hearts of sword cultivators. But today, if Nangong Juoyan won the position of Junior Sect Master, the Divine Artifact Sect would lose all control. In the future, the Nangong family would control the Divine Artifact Sect. Yi Guchen, I'll leave it all to you. Duan Tianfeng's expression was solemn, and he cupped his hands slightly at Yi Guchen. Senior, there's no need for that. I'll do my best. Yi Guchen also cupped his hands. There's no need for this in a competition without any suspense. Xiao Gongxing shook his head. In his eyes, the result was already set. It was just a formality. Nangong Huajing didn't say anything, but she looked at Duan Tianfeng with pity. He'd lost to Xiao Gongxing in the past. Now, his disciple was going to lose to Nangong Juoyan. This was fate. All right, the 10 of you follow me. Gu Beihan waved his hand. Soon Yiguchen and the others followed Gu Beihan all the way to the top of the volcano. When they approached the volcano, most of them surged with true energy, forming a protective barrier. The temperature around the heavenly cauldron was too high for ordinary people to bear. However, Gu Beihan and the other artificers were fine. Because they all had rare flames of heaven and earth, they could bear it as long as the temperature wasn't too high. Yiguchen didn't feel anything. The two types of heaven and earth unique flames he possessed were both of very high grades. The Nirvana demonic flame was a high-grade rare flame. The exalted void incineration was a supreme-grade rare flame. Gu Beihan was secretly surprised to see Yiguchen's relaxed and calm demeanor. Soon, Gu Beihan led the group into the volcano. The spectators didn't go down, but surrounded the volcano. The volcano was so large that it could hold thousands of people. It was like a ring-shaped spectator stand. Yiguchen, who had entered the crater of the volcano, looked around and was shocked. That's Chapter 1353. What Yiguchen saw was a giant bronze pagoda. The giant bronze pagoda stood inside the volcano, looking very ancient and mysterious. There were caves on the pagoda. From time to time, blazing flames would spurt out from the caves. Not only Yiguchen, but many spectators who came to the heavenly cauldron for the first time were also shocked when they saw the giant bronze pagoda standing inside the volcano. Gu Beihan explained, "This giant bronze pagoda was passed down from our ancestors to suppress and control the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. The 10 of you can borrow the power of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit through the caves during the forging process. But remember, you can't borrow too much, and you can't enter the giant bronze pagoda." In the past, there were many forgers who entered the giant bronze pagoda in order to borrow more power, but they never came out again, Gu Beihan warned in a serious tone. The power of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit was extremely powerful, let alone the younger generation of the divine dwelling stage. Even sovereigns or false saints would not be able to come out after entering. Even heavenly tribulation saints would not be able to come out unscathed. Even if they did not die, they would lose a layer of skin. Hearing Gu Beihan's warning, the spectators at the mouth of the volcano trembled, and they looked at the giant bronze pagoda with grave expressions. Yiguchen's eyes narrowed, and no one knew what he was thinking. "Well, if you're ready, let's start." Gu Beihan waved his hand. There were many forging platforms built around the giant bronze pagoda to make it easier for forgers to borrow the power of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. Yiguchen, Nangong Ju Yun, Gu Xiangling, Song Feichen, and the others each stepped onto a platform. At this moment, everyone's breathing seemed to stop. Duan Tianfeng couldn't help but clench his fists, feeling a rare nervousness. Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Huajing stood together, their expressions indifferent. Let the final round of the competition begin. As soon as Gu Beihan finished speaking, the last round of the competition to determine the junior sect master finally began. As soon as Gu Beihan finished speaking, Nangong Ju Yun moved first. He immediately took out a golden casting hammer. The surface of the hammer was imprinted with many patterns. It looked incomparably gorgeous, and there was a powerful fluctuation spreading out from it. That's a forging hammer at the level of a heavenly tribulation divine weapon. Some blacksmiths couldn't help but exclaim, their eyes filled with surprise and envy. Forging hammers at the level of heavenly tribulation weapons were extremely rare. But soon after, Gu Xiangling and Song Feichen both took out their forging hammers, which were divine tribulation weapons. Gu Xiangling's forging hammer should belong to sect master Gu Beihan. As for Song Feichen's forging hammer, it seems to belong to great elder Yang Qi. Some elders of divine artifact sect noticed. Then, everyone's eyes fell on Yiguchen. Yiguchen was still using the same supreme-grade mystical pattern divine weapon forging hammer. That Yiguchen's forging hammer isn't a heavenly tribulation weapon. That's a disadvantage. A good forging hammer can even be hammered 5 times with one strike. Many blacksmiths shook their heads slightly. To forge a divine weapon, the most basic thing was the forging of the materials. The more times one forged, the higher the quality of the materials, and naturally, the higher the chance of forging a high-grade divine weapon. Yi Guchen's forging hammer naturally put him at a disadvantage. However, Yi Guchen didn't care at all. In terms of the number of times he forged, he believed that few could compare to him. After all, the quality of his body and the strength of his soul were far from what ordinary blacksmiths could compare to. In the final stage, we'll see who can forge the highest quality divine weapon. I think that only by forging a quasi-heavenly tribulation divine weapon can one have a chance of competing for the position of junior sect master. Many people were discussing. Generally speaking, it wasn't that easy for a 6-star blacksmith to forge a quasi-heavenly tribulation divine weapon. Therefore, in everyone's eyes, if someone could forge a quasi-heavenly tribulation divine weapon, it was almost guaranteed. I think Nangong Ju Yun is the most likely candidate. He's been a 5-star blacksmith for a long time, and he should be a 6-star blacksmith now. Many people looked at Nangong Ju Yun. Nangong Ju Yun had a victorious smile on his face. He wiped his origin ring with his palm, and many rare materials were revealed. Some of the materials emitted a divine glow, blinding many people's eyes. That purple stone, could it be the legendary divine material, the purple crystal heavenly core? And that golden metal, why does it feel like the sun mystic crystal? And that piece of jade essence emitting cold air, it should be the extreme Yin divine essence. Looking at the materials that Nangong Ju Yun took out, especially the divine materials, many people's eyes burned with passion. Divine materials were something that could only be found by chance. However, when they thought of Nangong Ju Yun's identity as a member of the Nangong family, it wasn't impossible for him to collect these divine materials. Gu Xiangling also took out her forging materials, and there were 2 divine materials among them. Song Feichen did the same. In the end, everyone looked at Yi Guchen in unison. They all knew that most of the time, Yi Guchen was a loner who did not have much power. What kind of materials could he take out? Don't underestimate Yi Guchen. Previously, he cut out 2 divine materials at the Thousand Treasures workshop. However, even if Yi Guchen has the heavenly tribulation blue gold and void mother gold, it's not enough for him to forge, let alone compete with Nangong Ju Yun and the others. Some people discussed. Yi Guchen also glanced at the materials that Nangong Ju Yun and the others had taken out. He wasn't surprised. Nangong Ju Yun had prepared for a long time for the junior sect master selection. If there were no divine materials, then he would be surprised. Yi Guchen looked calm, and with a wave of his hand, he revealed his materials. There was no need to mention the heavenly tribulation blue gold and void mother gold. As for the other materials, they caused the many blacksmiths present to feel a sense of suffocation. Is the metal covered in Dao patterns a divine material, Dao Yuo Dao metal? Many blacksmiths were stunned when they saw the golden metal that Yi Guchen took out. And the liquid sealed in the stone. Is it the mica spirit containing saliva that can give divine weapons a trace of spirituality? A group of blacksmiths widened their eyes and took a deep breath. Also, look at that stone. It's shaped like a human and has 9 holes. Don't tell me that's a 9 holes divine stone. All the blacksmiths looked at the 9 holes divine stone. It was rumored that the 9 holes divine stone could give divine weapons the ability to absorb the spiritual chi of heaven and earth to cultivate. This kind of material, even among the sacred materials, was absolutely top-notch. Even sect Master Gu Beihan's heart trembled when he saw the 9 holes divine stone, let alone the elders of the divine artifact sect. This divine material was even harder to find than supreme-grade rare flames of heaven and earth. Everyone looked at Yi Guchen in shock. Yi Guchen's materials were too luxurious. Even Nangong Ju Yun's materials paled in comparison. Chapter 1354. This Yi Guchen is all alone. Where did he get so many rare materials? That's right. It's really beyond our expectations. Seeing the luxurious smithing gift bag that Yi Guchen took out, all the onlookers were shocked. Even the elders of the divine artifact sect coveted those divine materials. Young Master Yi Guchen is becoming more and more unexpected. Gu Xiangling's beautiful eyes sparkled as she looked at Yi Guchen. At first, everyone thought that Yi Guqun was completely inferior to Nangong Ju Yun in terms of forging. But now, there was probably no one who would say such a thing. In their eyes, even if Yi Guqun was still inferior to Nangong Ju Yun, he was still a forging genius. The materials can't decide everything. It's like giving rare ingredients to a lousy chef. He can only make food that is hard to swallow. Nangong Ju Yun commented indifferently. Yi Guqun only smiled in response. At this point, there was no point in trying to argue. In the end, it was all about the results. Now that you have the materials, the next step is to use the flames to smelt the materials and start forging. This stage is a competition of the quality of the rare flame, the control of the flame, and the number of times you use the materials, Gu Beihan said. He wasn't the only one. Everyone present was well aware of this. Rare flames were too important to blacksmiths. The presence of a rare flame had a huge impact on the blacksmith's skill and the quality of the weapons they forged. However, the 10 blacksmiths who were able to reach this stage were all forging geniuses. It was impossible that they didn't have rare flames. Song Feichen directly brought out his own heaven and earth flame, volcanic rock flame. This flame existed in the depths of volcanoes. After being compressed for 1,000 years, it was extremely hot and was very suitable for forging. Perhaps it was because it was in a volcano, but Song Feichen's volcanic rock flame burned even more fiercely. Volcanic rock flame is a very good forging flame. Some people nodded slightly. Yang Qi was quite satisfied when he saw this. Song Feichen's performance didn't disappoint him. Then, Gu Xiangling also took out her own special flame, the sea blue water flame. This kind of flame was very strange. It existed at the bottom of the magma in the deep sea. Furthermore, this kind of flame had a gentle temperament and a uniform temperature. It was also very suitable for refining weapons. When the crowd saw that both of them had summoned their heavenly rare flames, they turned their attention back to Yi Guqun and Nangong Ju Yun. Yi Guqun did not hesitate. He raised his hand and the pitch-black heart demon flame rose. At this stage, these materials only needed to be calcined with the Nirvana demonic heart flame. As expected, he only has the demonic heart flame. Although it's an upper-grade natural flame, I'm afraid it's no match for Nangong Ju Yun. Some elders of the artifact sect shook their heads. Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Huajing both smiled faintly. They were confident in what they were doing. I heard that you obtained the supreme-grade heavenly flame at the Wanbao house. However, it seems that you have not refined it yet. Nangong Ju Yun could not help but smile. Why are you so talkative? Don't you know that you can't be distracted while forging? Yi Guqun did not look sideways. He was focused on forging as he spoke indifferently. Your glib tongue is better than your forging skills. Nangong Ju Yun smiled coldly. He did not say anything else and summoned his own flame. In his eyes, 2 types of flames, one gold and one silver, slowly lit up. As he raised his hand, the dazzling golden flame and the chilling silver flame surged out at the same time. Is that Nangong Ju Yun's heavenly rare flame? He summoned 2 types of heavenly rare flames at the same time. Moreover, their grades are extremely high. They seem to be supreme-grade heavenly rare flames. Many of the people present had never seen Nangong Ju Yun summon his own flame. This was their first time seeing it. Could that golden flame be the true sun mystic flame? It's a supreme-grade heavenly rare flame. And that chilling flame should be the moon frost flame. It's also a supreme-grade heavenly rare flame. Many people around the heavenly cauldron took a deep breath when they saw Nangong Ju Yun summon the gold and silver flames. 2 supreme-grade rare fires of heaven and earth was one thing, but what was even rarer was that these 2 rare fires seemed to be corresponding flames. One was hard and one was soft. One was yin and one was yang. Many blacksmiths could not imagine how Nangong Ju Yun was able to refine 2 supreme-grade heavenly rare flames of completely different attributes into his body at the same time. As expected of the divine weapon prince. Putting everything else aside, just these 2 supreme-grade heavenly rare flames are enough to live up to his reputation, some people exclaimed. The true sun mystic flame and the moon frost flame were both powerful weapons, whether used for forging or fighting. Even Yi Guqun's eyes flashed with a dark light. Although they were enemies, Yiguchen had to admit that Nangong Juyun was able to become one of the 10 great young masters. Moreover, he was a divine weapon prince who focused on forging. However, Yiguchen was not afraid at all. After all, he still had a trump card that he had not revealed. All of the participating blacksmiths summoned their supreme-grade heavenly rare flames. Next, they began to forge. As everyone knew, the number of times one forged was related to the quality of the material. The more times they forged, the less impurities there would be in the materials and the higher the quality. Moreover, this kind of forging was not as simple as using a casting hammer. It also required the blacksmiths to merge their vital energy and mind. Therefore, this kind of forging consumed a lot of physical strength and soul power. Clang, clang, clang. Sounds of hammering could be heard around the bronze tower as the 10 blacksmiths began to forge. However, the most eye-catching blacksmith was not Nangong Juyun, but Yiguchen. This was because everyone realized that Yiguchen's movements had not changed since the beginning. At this moment, Yiguchen seemed to have turned into a robot. He did not feel any fatigue, soreness, or exhaustion. Look at Yiguchen. His movements have not changed at all. There was news before that Yiguchen's physical body was extremely strong. It seems that he has obtained a mysterious physical body inheritance. Many people knew that Yiguchen's physical body was strong, but not many knew that Yiguchen had inherited the inheritance of the ancient god clan. With such a physical body as a foundation, Yiguchen was naturally at the top of the list in terms of number of times he had forged. Following closely behind was Nangong Juyun, followed by Song Feichen and Gu Xiangling. Everyone could see that the final winner could only be one of these four. Who will it be? Yiguchen's physical body is unparalleled. The materials used are rare and the number of times he has forged is shocking. Nangong Juyun has 2 supreme-grade heavenly rare flames. His forging skills are also extraordinary. Song Feichen is the eldest senior brother of the divine artifact sect. He is also the disciple of the first elder, Yang Qi. He is also not weak. Gu Xiangling is the daughter of the sect master, Gu Beihan. Although she is the only woman among the 4, she is not weak either. Everyone's curiosity was piqued. Who would be the final winner? Chapter 1355. Time passed bit by bit. The 10 participating blacksmiths were all doing their best in this final round, so their forging wouldn't end so quickly. Everyone wanted to push themselves to their limits so that the quality of their final weapon would be higher. Did I count wrongly? Yiguchen broke through 1 million refinements. Many people looked at Yiguchen as if they were looking at a monster. 1 million refinements was the limit of most blacksmiths. Not to mention the blacksmiths of the younger generation, there weren't many blacksmiths of the older generation who could reach 1 million refinements. What was even more shocking was that even though Yiguchen had reached 1 million refinements, he didn't show any signs of exhaustion. There was only some sweat on his face. Moreover, it seemed like he was going to continue forging. Not long after, Nangong Juyun also broke through to 1 million refinements. However, his face was obviously pale and he was sweating profusely. Nangong Juyun's physical body couldn't compare to Yiguchen's. 1 million refinements was almost his limit. As for Song Feichen, he only had about 800,000 refinements. Gu Xiangling had more than 700,000 refinements. Could it be that Yiguchen's vitality and energy never run out? Song Feichen thought in disbelief. As time passed, Yiguchen's number of refinements also broke through to 2 million refinements. This was definitely a record that could shock the world of blacksmithing. Not to mention Nangong Juyun and the others, even Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Huajing were slightly stunned. They were unable to believe their eyes. The moment Yiguchen reached 2 million refinements, the heavenly tribulation blue gold, void mother gold, zenith heaven gold, and other sacred materials bloomed with unprecedented brilliance. Thousands of rays of divine light, thousands of auspicious colors, and all kinds of strange phenomena appeared. It was shocking. Could it be that he has already reached perfection? The first elder, Yang Qi, was tongue-tied when he saw this scene. 2 million refinements meant that almost all the impurities in the materials had been removed, leaving behind the purest part. This Yiguchen is too unexpected. The materials he forged have already reached perfection. It's hard to imagine what kind of divine weapon he will forge in the future. It would be a pity to use this perfect sacred material to forge a quasi-apocalypse weapon. However, don't even think about a heavenly tribulation weapon. Even if Yiguchen is a 6-star blacksmith, it's impossible for him to forge a heavenly tribulation weapon. Some of the blacksmiths present sighed. Perfect-grade materials were too rare. They felt that it was a pity to use it to forge quasi-heavenly tribulation divine weapons. This kind of material could be used to forge 10th tribulation or 100 tribulation weapons. It was even enough to forge 1,000 tribulation divine weapons and 10,000 tribulation divine weapons. Even Yiguchen himself did not expect that he would be able to forge the materials to the perfect level. Next up is the 9 Orifices Divine Stone, Yiguchen murmured. The 9 Orifice Divine Stone was extremely rare even among divine materials. Moreover, it was even harder to forge and smelt. Yiguchen controlled the Nirvana demonic flame and began to calcine the 9 Orifices Divine Stone. However, to Yiguchen's surprise, he found that the Nirvana demonic flame could not melt the 9 Orifices Divine Stone. This scene was also seen by the others. What's going on? The 9 Orifices Divine Stone shows no signs of softening? Nonsense, the 9 Orifices Divine Stone is considered top grade even among divine materials. Ordinary rare flames of the heavens and earth have no effect on it at all. Even an upper-grade rare flame of the heavens and earth may not be able to melt it. I see. Could it be that only a supreme-grade rare flame of the heavens and earth can do it? But doesn't Yiguchen only have the Nirvana demonic flame? How is he going to forge it? He should ask Nangong Juyun. Perhaps Nangong Juyun will help him? Seeing Yiguchen's situation, there were a lot of discussions around. Because this kind of situation rarely happened in the past. Unless it was an extremely rare and tough material, ordinary rare flames of the heavens and earth could definitely melt it. If that's the case, won't Yiguchen be embarrassed? Some people said. Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Huajing sneered at the same time. They did not expect that Yiguchen would make such a fool of himself at the last stage. Of course, this did not mean that Yiguchen's Nirvana demonic flame was of a low grade. It was that the 9 Orifices Divine Stone's quality was too high. It was extremely tough, and even an upper-grade rare flame of the heavens and earth was useless. Young Master Yi is in trouble now. Gu Xiangling was also forging, but she was still worried about Yiguchen in her heart. When Yiguchen forged a perfect material earlier, she thought that Yiguchen might be able to fight against Nangong Juyun. But now Yiguchen was in trouble, and she was powerless to help. Song Feichen, on the other hand, had a gloating expression. When Nangong Juyun saw this, he could not help but chuckle. Yiguchen, looks like your rare flames of the heavens and earth can't melt the 9 Orifice Divine Stone. Do you need my help? Nangong Juyun's tone was mocking. His True Yang Mystic Flame and Moonfrost Flame were both rare flames of the heavens and earth. They were indeed capable of helping Yiguchen melt the 9 Orifice Divine Stone. However, even a fool knew that Nangong Juyun was just trying to annoy Yiguchen. How could he help Yiguchen melt the 9 Orifice Divine Stone? Peh. Yiguchen smiled faintly and did not panic at all. But, can't I? I'm not joking. But the condition is that I want half of the 9 Orifice Divine Stone after it's melted. Nangong Juyun raised his eyebrows and said. Hearing this, the surrounding people were shocked. They did not expect Nangong Juyun to really want to help. Of course, half of the 9 Orifice Divine Stone was a condition that no one could accept. Yiguchen's eyes were cold as he said indifferently, Can you shut up? It seems that my good intentions have been fed to the dogs. Nangong Juyun narrowed his eyes. Yiguchen did not say anything and slowly raised his hand. What is he doing? Seeing Yiguchen's action, everyone's eyes were filled with doubt. In the next moment, a pale white flame suddenly spread out from Yiguchen's hand. The white flame surged like a raging tide and shook the space. It was as if the entire void was being cleansed like waves of water. When they saw the white flame, everyone around the heavenly cauldron, from the elders of the divine artifact sect to the spectators, was shocked and felt their scalps go numb. The sound of breathing could be heard everywhere. Unparalleled shock. Am I seeing things? That's the Great Luo Void Incineration Flame? That's right. It's the flame that Yi Guchen obtained at the Million Treasures Pavilion. But it's only been a few days. How can he refine it? Everyone was shocked. Everyone was stunned. Even Sect Master Gu Beihan was slightly dumbfounded. It took him a while to recover. Chapter 1356. It was no longer a secret that Yi Guchen had obtained the Daluo Void Incineration Flame from the Myriad Treasures House. Everyone in Heavenly Craftsmanship City knew about it. However, how many days had it been since the incident at the Myriad Treasures House? No one thought that Yi Guchen could refine a supreme-grade rare flame in these few days. Even some venerables had to be extremely careful when refining supreme-grade rare flames. If they were not careful, they might end up being burned by the flames. At this moment, everyone fell silent when they saw the white flame rising from Yi Guchen's palm. The flame reflected Nangong Juyun's face, which looked exceptionally stiff and ugly. He was still mocking Yi Guchen just now and negotiating terms with him as if he was giving alms. Now, Yi Guchen directly took out a supreme-grade rare flame of the same level and did not need his help at all. It was a slap in the face. Not only him, but Xiao Gongxing and Nangong Huajing also looked gloomy. Yi Guchen seemed to be gradually breaking out of their expectations and control. How could he completely refine the Daluo Void Incineration Flame in a few days? Song Feichen's heart trembled, and he could not calm down. He saw Yi Guchen take out the Daluo Void Incineration Flame with his own eyes at the Myriad Treasures House. It was also because of this that he knew that it was only a few days apart. Gu Xiangling's chest also rose and fell slightly, and she sighed inwardly. Young Master Yi is indeed extraordinary. He has exceeded everyone's expectations time and time again. Perhaps he really can. Everyone around the Heavenly Craftsmanship Furnace was uneasy. Nangong Huajing could not help but ask Duan Tianfeng, "Senior brother Duan, you already know that Yi Guchen has refined the Daluo Void Incineration Flame?" Of course, he has the ability to do so. Duan Tianfeng's tone was slightly proud. This was the disciple he had chosen, and he was proud of him. It's surprising, but it can't change the outcome. Xiao Gongxing's expression was cold. He was still confident in Nangong Juyun. The reason was simple. Nangong Juyun had inherited Xiao Gongxing's God-grade forging technique. This time, he would be making a big move. On the other side, Nangong Juyun took a deep breath and quickly adjusted his state of mind. After all, he was the pride of the Overlord clan and one of the 10 young masters. If he did not have this bit of mental fortitude, how could he stand on his own? It doesn't matter. So what if he has refined the Daluo Void Incineration Flame? I still have the advantage. Moreover, I will definitely win this time, Nangong Juyun murmured in his heart as a bright light flashed through his eyes. Next, Yi Guchen used the Origin Void Incineration Flame to burn the 9 Orifices Divine Stone. The processing of materials was finally over. Next, it was time to fuse and smelt with casting techniques. This step was very important, and it was also the part that tested the blacksmith's ability the most. The importance of casting techniques to blacksmiths was equivalent to the importance of cultivation techniques to martial artists. A superior forging technique could greatly increase the success rate of forging a divine weapon, and it could also improve the quality of the divine weapon. In this segment, Nangong Juyun is probably better. After all, he has inherited Bei Yen Weapon Emperor's God-tier forging technique. Many blacksmiths whispered to each other. It could be said that a God-tier forging technique was an existence that all blacksmiths dreamed of. It was a forging technique that could forge primordial famed swords. Even with Nangong Juyun's strength, he couldn't truly unleash the power of the God-tier forging technique. However, even if he could only unleash 1% of its power, it would be enough for him to crush everyone else. Nangong Juyun should be the winner of this segment, right? That's right. Who can defeat a God-tier forging technique? Even the Divine Artifact sect doesn't have a God-tier forging technique, Many people discussed. Eunuch Shao had obtained the God-tier forging technique by accident, and it wasn't inherited from the Divine Artifact sect. Eunuch Shao hadn't given it to the Divine Artifact sect either. This was also the reason why Gu Beihan didn't like Eunuch Shao. As a member of the Divine Artifact sect, it was fine if he didn't give the God-tier forging technique to the sect after obtaining it. However, he had actually passed it to Nangong Ju Yun and even allowed him to compete for the position of Divine Artifact Sect's junior sect master. Eunuch Zhao's actions were the reason why Gu Beihan, Yang Qi, and the others were disappointed. Gu Xiangling, Song Feichen, and the others also stared at Nangong Ju Yun. Nangong Ju Yun's lips curled up into a faint smile. He glanced at the various materials in front of him and raised his hands at the same time. The true Yang Profound Flame and Extreme Yin Frost Flame also surged out. In an instant, the gold and silver flames surged into the sky. At the same time, countless runes floated within the flames. Everyone who saw this scene was deeply shocked. God-tier forging technique. Nangong Ju Yun is going to use a God-tier forging technique. Everyone's eyes were focused on Nangong Ju Yun, especially the artificers. Their eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. Even Song Feichen and Gu Xiangling's eyes were solemn and filled with shock. Heaven and earth as the furnace, creation as the workmanship, yin and yang as the charcoal, and all things as the copper. Sun and moon refining origin. Nangong Ju Yun's tone was cold and solemn. The two flames on his palms burned like the sun and moon. This was the God-tier forging technique that Nangong Ju Yun had inherited from Eunuch Shao, sun and moon refining origin. This God-tier forging technique seemed to use heaven and earth as the furnace and the sun and moon as the fire. The scene when it was used was extremely shocking. What was even more shocking was that Nangong Ju Yun's true Yang Profound Flame and Extreme Yin Frost Flame were compatible with the attributes of the sun and moon refining origin. The true Yang Profound Flame was of the Yang attribute. The Extreme Yin Frost Flame was of the Yin attribute. Yi Guchen, I've even used a God-tier forging technique. What are you going to use to fight me? Nangong Ju Yun's attitude was condescending. With his strength, he could not use even 1% of the sun and moon refining origin's power. However, it was easy for him to use it to forge a divine weapon and become the champion. Hearing this, Yi Guchen said nothing. However, Gu Xiangling and Song Feichen's faces did not look too good. They had also used their own forging techniques. Although they were of high grades, they could not be compared to Nangong Ju Yun's God-tier forging technique. This was because a God-tier forging technique could be used to forge a primordial famed sword. Of course, even if Shao Gong used a God-tier forging technique, he would not be able to forge a primordial famed sword. This was because a primordial famed sword could only be forged by a God-tier forging master using a God-tier forging technique and using all sorts of sacred materials and rare treasures. Using the power of the fire spirit to forge a divine weapon. Nangong Ju Yun activated his flames again and resonated with the 10,000-year-old fire spirit within the bronze pagoda. Then, wisps of flames spread out from the bronze pagoda. These flames were like primal chaos and contained thousands of colors. Nangong Ju Yun is starting to use the power of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. Seeing this, many elders of the Divine Artifact sect exclaimed. The flames of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit were of extremely high quality. They were even more powerful than supreme-grade rare flames. I, Song Feichen, will never admit defeat. Song Feichen roared. He was not willing to let his glory be overshadowed by Nangong Ju Yun and Yi Guchen. He took out a piece of crimson crystal and poured his true qi into it to activate it. That's a fire spirit crystal. Is he crazy? He's using a fire spirit crystal to draw the power of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. Seeing Song Feichen's actions, Yang Qi and the others' faces turned red as they cursed inwardly. The fire spirit crystal did have the ability to draw the power of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. However, if he was not careful, he would suffer a backlash. Wisps of primal chaos flames were also drawn to Song Feichen. As for Gu Xiangling, she did not go to extremes because she already knew that she had no chance of winning. Thus, at this moment, all of her attention was focused on Yi Guqin. Not only Gu Xiangling but Duan Tianfeng, Gu Beihan, Xiao Gong, and Nangong Huajing were also looking at him. At this moment, most of the people were looking at Yi Guqin. Now, Nangong Juyun and Song Feichen had gone all out and used their trump cards. How would Yi Guqin deal with this? Chapter 1357. Everyone present knew that this was the crucial moment of the junior sect master selection. Whether or not Yi Guqin could forge a high-grade divine weapon would depend on whether or not he could surpass Nangong Juyun and Song Feichen in terms of forging. I think Yi Guqin is in a tough spot. Nangong Juyun is using two types of supreme rare flames and the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit. With the help of the god-tier forging technique, no one can compare to him. That's right. Even Song Feichen is throwing caution to the wind and taking out the fire spirit crystal. He's going all out. If Yi Guqin doesn't have a decisive trump card, it's impossible for him to win against these two. Everyone present, whether they were from Divine Artifact sect or the spectators, was well aware of this. If Yi Guqin didn't have a decisive trump card, it was almost impossible for him to surpass Nangong Juyun. It was also because of this that Yi Guqin had attracted the attention of everyone. They all wanted to know what kind of trump card the disciple chosen by the Southern Cauldron Saint had. God-tier forging technique? Yi Guqin sized up Nangong Juyun, but he didn't look surprised. Duan Tianfeng had already told him that Xiao Gongfu had imparted the God-tier forging technique to Nangong Juyun. It seems like I can only use that move. But before that, I have to think of a way to borrow the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit. Yi Guqin muttered to himself. Only those who understood the forbidden forging technique knew how heaven-defying it was. But at the same time, it was also very difficult to succeed. It was even more difficult than the god-tier forging technique. Yi Guqin pondered. If he wanted to forge a divine weapon with the forbidden forging technique, the success rate was very low. The only possibility was to borrow the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit. The power of the 10,000-year fire spirit could not only assist Yi Guqin in forging, but also improve the quality of the divine weapon. However, compared to Nangong Juyun and Song Feichen, Yi Guqin had a major flaw. He had never stayed in Divine Artifact sect before, so he naturally didn't know how to borrow the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit. This was Yi Guqin's first time coming to this heavenly cauldron. He was not as familiar with it as Nangong Juyun and Song Feichen. The crowd also saw Yi Guqin's predicament. I'm afraid Yi Guqin is in trouble now. He doesn't know how to borrow the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit. Gu Beihan shook his head slightly. Sigh, it's all for naught. Yang Qi sighed in his heart. Previously, Yi Guqin's performance had stunned many people. They believed that he would be Nangong Juyun's strongest opponent. As a result, they now knew that Yi Guqin would not borrow the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit. This was an absolute disadvantage. So it's like this. Gu Xiangling bit her lip. Although she was also smithing, she knew very well that she could no longer compete for first place. Compared to Song Feichen, Gu Xiangling felt that Yi Guqin could be compared to Nangong Juyun. Just when everyone thought that Yi Guqin would be at a disadvantage, Yi Guqin did something that no one expected. He walked step by step toward the entrance of the bronze tower. What's going on? What is Yi Guqin doing? Don't tell me he's going to enter the bronze tower. Everyone was surprised to see Yi Guqin's actions. Whether it was the people of the Divine Artifact sect or the other spectators, they all knew that the bronze tower was where the 10,000-year fire spirit was sealed. Anyone who rashly entered would not have a good ending. Not to mention Yi Guqin, who was only at the divine dwelling stage, even a sovereign or a false saint would have a great risk of dying. Even a heavenly tribulation saint would lose a layer of skin even if they didn't die. This was because the chaos heavenly fire controlled by the 10,000-year fire spirit was too powerful. Some saints with weaker physical bodies could not withstand it. What is he doing? Is he committing suicide? Gu Beihan frowned. If Yi Guqin died in the Divine Artifact sect, the Divine Artifact sect would be in a lot of trouble. Sir Yi, please wait. It's too dangerous inside the bronze tower. Don't go in. Seeing this, Gu Xiangling hurriedly shouted with a nervous look on her face. She thought that Yiguchen did not know how dangerous the 10,000-year fire spirit was. Yiguchen turned around and smiled. He did not say anything and continued to walk in. On the other side, Xiao Gongxing and Nangong Huajing were also surprised. Xiao Gongxing turned to look at Duan Tianfeng and said in a playful tone, "Duan Tianfeng, could it be that your disciple has lost all hope and decided to commit suicide because he knows he can't win? Don't worry. Even if your disciple dies, my disciple will live well," Duan Tianfeng said coldly. Although he said that, Duan Tianfeng's heart was beating like a drum. After all, he was a member of the Divine Artifact sect and knew the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit better than anyone else. To be honest, Duan Tianfeng did not understand why Yiguchen would take such a risk. However, in his eyes, Yiguchen was never a reckless person. He naturally had his reasons for doing so. What is Yiguchen trying to do? Is he really courting death? Nangong Zhuyan muttered to himself as he watched Yiguchen walk into the cave. He vaguely felt that Yiguchen must have his reasons for doing so. However, Nangong Zhuyan could not figure out what trump card Yiguchen had that allowed him to safely face the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit. Meanwhile, Song Feichen sneered in his heart, "Yiguchen is even crazier than me. In order to borrow the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit, he is willing to risk his life." Most of the people present thought that Yiguchen was crazy. Only Yiguchen himself knew that his mind was extremely clear. Yiguchen naturally would not do something that would lead to his own death. However, in Yiguchen's view, taking a certain risk in order to obtain power and transform was worth it. Yiguchen directly stepped into the giant bronze tower. In the outside world, the world was silent. He actually managed to enter. This Yiguchen is really capable of doing some shocking things wherever he goes. Many people sighed with emotion. Wherever Yiguchen was, there would be no lack of big things. "Father, why didn't you stop young Master Yi?" Gu Xiangling asked, her face pale. "Sai, this is his own choice. Moreover, we can't interfere in the competition." Gu Beihan shook his head. How could this be? Gu Xiangling was slightly dazed. She did have a good impression of Yiguchen. His character, experience, and other aspects were far better than Nangong Zhuyan and Song Feichen. However, let alone divine dwelling experts, even saints would not feel good inside the giant bronze tower. Therefore, the chances of Yiguchen coming out alive were very slim. Everyone thought that Yiguchen was most likely going to die this time. While such thoughts arose in the outside world, Yiguchen himself had already entered the giant bronze tower. Chapter 1358. As soon as Yiguchen stepped into the bronze pagoda, the first thing he felt was heat. It was extremely hot. It felt as if he had stepped into the fiery purgatory of the 18 levels of hell. The surroundings were densely packed with burning flames. Yiguchen immediately activated the demonic heart flame to protect himself. Only then did he manage to offset part of the heat. At this time, Yiguchen finally had the time to observe the situation in the pagoda. The entire pagoda looked bottomless, like an abyss. Yiguchen was now at the top of the bronze pagoda. Logically speaking, this should be the place where the flames were the weakest and thinnest. However, even here, Yiguchen had to activate the demonic heart flame to protect himself. One could imagine how powerful the 10,000-year fire spirit was. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Cultivating the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra and overcoming the 9 Tribulations to become a god is a heaven-defying act. How can there be no danger? Yiguchen's eyes were shining. How could he not know the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit? Previously, Duan Tianfeng had warned him that if he should not force himself to borrow the power of the 10,000-year fire spirit because he might be injured or even killed if he was not careful. However, Yiguchen had already made his own decision. He cultivated the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra and had an unparalleled physical body. He also had 2 types of unique flames to protect himself. It was not impossible for him to try to overcome the tribulations with the 10,000-year fire spirit. Yiguchen naturally knew how dangerous it was to use the 10,000-year fire spirit to overcome the tribulations. However, if he did not try because of the danger, Yiguchen did not know how long it would take for him to completely overcome the 4 tribulations. Time waits for no man. When I reach Sky Burial Island, I will face Dihaoyan. Before that, I will not miss any opportunity that can make me stronger. Yiguchen's eyes were cold. He felt a sense of urgency in his heart, because at Sky Burial Island he would have an ultimate battle with Dihaoyan. Dihaoyan was definitely a powerful opponent that could not be underestimated. If my guess is correct, the 10,000-year fire spirit should be at the bottom of the bronze tower. Yiguchen thought to himself as he began to move towards the bottom of the bronze tower. For every 1,000 feet it descended, the temperature of the surrounding space would rise by a level. In the end, Yiguchen had no choice but to refine the exalted void blaze as well. White and black flames intertwined, forming a flame shield around Yiguchen's body. Even so, the gradually rising temperature caused Yiguchen to frown. After a long descent, Yiguchen finally came to a stop. This was because they had already reached the bottom of the bronze tower. Looking over, Yiguchen's gaze suddenly froze. At the bottom of the bronze tower was an ancient giant formation. The entire formation extended to the inner walls of the bronze pagoda, becoming one with the pagoda. This was clearly a formation used to suppress and seal. And at the bottom of the bronze pagoda, endless chaotic flames roiled. The flame was extremely strange. It was a colorful chaotic color, as if it was the combination of thousands of strange flames. That's the chaotic divine flame, Yiguchen murmured. He had heard from the old drunkard that the flame controlled by the 10,000-year fire spirit was a chaotic divine flame born from the chaos beyond the heavens. This chaotic divine flame was of extremely high quality and extremely powerful. It had even surpassed the supreme-grade rare flames of the universe and reached the level of divine flame. It was rumored that during the primordial age, some divine craftsmen who forged famed primordial swords used divine flames to forge them. Divine flames were of a higher level than supreme-grade rare flames of the universe. Even the sect master of the divine weapon sect, Gu Beihan, did not possess such a flame. Master Xiao and Duan Tianfeng did not possess it either. This was because divine flames were too rare and too rare. Even if one could encounter one, refining it was extremely difficult. It was several times more difficult than refining supreme-grade rare flames of the universe. Because of these conditions, divine flames rarely appeared in the world and were rarely controlled by anyone. Yiguchen did not expect to see a divine flame here. The chaotic divine flame is somewhat compatible with my chaotic sea of consciousness. Yiguchen pondered. His sea of consciousness also had the chaotic attribute. However, Yiguchen's attention was still on the chaotic divine flame. There was an existence similar to a qilin in it. It looked like a qilin beast, but it was not a real living creature. It was a fire spirit formed by the chaotic divine flame. Is that the 10,000-year fire spirit? Yiguchen murmured. Just as Yiguchen was paying attention to the 10,000-year fire spirit, the 10,000-year fire spirit also noticed Yiguchen. Although the 10,000-year fire spirit was not very intelligent, it would instinctively attack any living creature that approached it. This was because the chaotic divine flame was unwilling to be subdued by anyone. Therefore, the 10,000-year fire spirit would attack anyone that approached it. It was also because of this that no one dared to enter the bronze pagoda. This was because not many people could withstand the burning of the chaotic divine flame. The 10,000-year fire spirit was surrounded by colorful chaotic divine flame. It roared at Yiguchen and charged at him. The monstrous chaotic divine flame spread out and formed a huge fire tide. It almost filled the entire bronze pagoda and spewed out of the cave. At the same time, the crowd outside the bronze tower saw the surging primal chaos divine flame gushing out of the cave. What's going on? Why did the flame suddenly surge out? Could it be that the 10,000-year fire spirit is rebelling? The onlookers were shocked. No, I'm afraid that Yiguchen has provoked the 10,000-year fire spirit, Gu Beihan said in a deep voice. What? As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was shocked. Although Yiguchen had entered the bronze pagoda, it was not certain that he would be killed. as long as he did not provoke the 10,000-year fire spirit. But looking at the state of the flames, it was obvious that the 10,000-year fire spirit had been provoked. How can this be? Gu Xiangling bit her red lips. She originally had a glimmer of hope that Yi Guqin would come out safely. But now, it seemed that the probability of Yi Guqin being alive was almost zero, not to mention getting out of there safely. This was because everyone knew that it was almost impossible for a divine dwelling stage expert to resist the primal chaos divine fire. I thought that Yi Guqin, who had swept across the sacred emperor world, would have some ability. It seems that I have overestimated him. Nangong Ju Yun sneered as he refined his divine weapon. After dealing with the most troublesome opponent, there was no longer any suspense about the result. It was almost impossible for Gu Xiangling to surpass him. As for Song Feichen, even though he had brought out the fire spirit crystal, Nangong Ju Yun did not care about him at all. The position of junior sect master has finally fallen into my hands. Nangong Ju Yun smiled happily. Chapter 1359. In the eyes of the crowd, Yi Guqin, who had caused the fire spirit to go berserk, had no chance of surviving. I didn't expect that Yi Guqin, who had stirred up a storm in the holy imperial world, would end up like this. Yes, I was looking forward to his performance on Sky Burial Island. I wanted to see the ultimate battle between Yi Guqin and Di Haoqian. Now, it seems that there is no hope. The crowd sighed and sighed. This time, even Duan Tianfeng's heart was pounding. Although he believed that Yi Guqin had his own plans, he found it hard to imagine how Yi Guqin would survive. Yi Guqin, can you create another miracle? Duan Tianfeng muttered to himself. Just as everyone in the outside world thought that Yi Guqin had died, a voice rang out. At the bottom of the bronze tower, Yi Guqin was in a life-and-death struggle with the fire spirit. The fire spirit's only attack was the chaotic divine fire. Once the chaotic divine fire appeared, all other flames would submit. Even if Yi Guqin used the demonic heart flame and the Daluo void incineration flame, it was useless. The scorching heat almost immediately charred Yi Guqin's skin to an incomparably black color. The pain of being burned by the chaotic divine fire was not something that anyone could endure. Xianyuan heavy water. Yi Guqin used the Xianyuan heavy water from his spiritual dwelling in his dantian to help him resist the power of the chaotic divine fire. However, it was better than nothing. Heart Sutra of 9 Tribulations. Yi Guqin activated the Heart Sutra of 9 Tribulations and began to pass the tribulation. His dantian seemed to have turned into the origin of a black hole. The chaotic divine fire around him surged into it. In an instant, Yi Guqin felt a burning pain as if he was being torn apart. Even with Yi Guqin's composure, his face turned pale and his body trembled violently. His muscles and bones were charred at a speed visible to the naked eye. Ancient God's Heart. Yi Guqin activated the sealed Ancient God's Heart. The blood of the ancient gods flowed out as if it was free. This was the heart of Tian Tong King from the ancient god tribe. The ancient god blood that flowed out of it contained a strong life force. However, even with the help of the ancient god's blood, Yi Guqin's situation was still very critical. This was because the primal chaos divine flame was too powerful. Even the ancient god's blood could not replenish Yi Guqin's physical vitality. Yi Guqin took out a few more stalks of sacred medicine. With his current status in the Sword Dynasty, sacred herbs were not particularly rare to him. Yi Guqin immediately took out 4 saint-level herbs and refined them into his body. In an instant, surging life essence spread out from his body, nourishing Yi Guqin's burned meridians and internal organs. At the same time, Yi Guqin also took out some ice attribute elixirs and pills to reduce the damage of the chaos divine flame. Although the effect was minimal, it was better than nothing. Under Yi Guqin's various methods, although he was still suffering from the pain of purgatory, he was barely able to hang on to a thread of life. Of course, the main reason for this was that Yi Guqin cultivated the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra. The 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra could transform the power of the chaos divine flame into tribulation power. Otherwise, without the help of the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra, Yiguchen would not have been able to survive the burning of the chaos divine flame no matter how strong his physical body was. After all, this was a flame that even honorables and false saints were afraid of. The 10,000-year-old fire spirit was also very surprised. It did not expect its chaos divine flame to be unable to kill this lowly human warrior in front of it. However, the 10,000-year-old fire spirit only knew how to use the chaos divine flame to attack. Therefore, it only continued to use the chaos divine flame to burn Yiguchen. Yiguchen's dantian also began to transform again in the chaos divine flame tribulation. At this moment in the outside world, while everyone was lamenting Yiguchen's death, their attention was also on the final battle. Gu Xiangling's divine weapon was almost complete. The elders of the divine artifact sect concluded that the divine weapon Gu Xiangling refined in the end would probably be at the level of a quasi-tribulation divine weapon. This was already a very good result. But now, none of the elders of the divine artifact sect could laugh, because this result could not be compared to Nangong Juyun's. On the other side, Song Feichen was also doing his best. This won't do. If this continues, I will definitely not be able to beat Nangong Juyun. Song Feichen could feel the shocking fluctuations from Nangong Juyun. He gritted his teeth and poured his true qi into the fire spirit crystal again. In an instant, more chaos divine flame was drawn over. Not good. Brat, stop. First Elder Yang Qi's expression changed when he saw this. The 10,000-year-old fire spirit had already gone berserk. Song Feichen would definitely not be able to control the power of the fire spirit crystal now. As expected, a large mass of primal chaos divine fire surged towards Song Feichen. Song Feichen's expression changed drastically when he saw this. He hurriedly retreated. But even so, he was still affected and let out an ear-piercing scream. My hand, my hand. Song Feichen's entire body was charred black. He raised his hand, and the charred bones of his hands were exposed. Damn it! Yang Qi's expression darkened. He landed in front of Song Feichen in a flash and hurriedly took out a pill for Song Feichen to consume. But Song Feichen's hands were already burned to the bone. Even if they could be preserved, they would probably be crippled. You idiot! Can't you even maintain the most basic patience of a blacksmith? How could you do such a reckless thing? Yang Qi said resentfully. Song Feichen's face was pale and his heart was dead. From the moment Yang Qi interfered, he had already lost the right to compete for first place. Taking a step back, even without this reason, Song Feichen's hands would definitely not be able to complete the next forging. Song Feichen could be said to have tried to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. He had even ruined his future forging prospects. How could this be? It's all because of that Yiguchen. If it wasn't for him causing the fire spirit to go berserk, I wouldn't have fallen to this state. Song Feichen's expression was grim as he blamed Yiguchen. It's a pity that I didn't see Yiguchen's death with my own eyes. Song Feichen thought viciously. With Song Feichen losing the right to participate, the outcome of the young sect master selection was almost obvious. Yiguchen entering the Bronze Tower was equivalent to dying. Song Feichen's hands were crippled and he lost the right to participate. Gu Xiangling's weapon was obviously incomparable to Nangong Juyun's. It was obvious who the final winner would be. As expected. Xiao Gongsheng revealed a faint smile. Nangong Huajing also smiled. After all, Nangong Juyun was a prodigy of the Nangong family. If he became the young sect master and took control of the divine artifact sect in the future, it would be extremely beneficial for the Nangong family. Just when everyone thought that the dust had settled, a voice suddenly rang out. Yiguchen, who was inside the Bronze Tower, began to transform. Chapter 1360. At the bottom of the giant Bronze Tower, Yiguchen was sitting cross-legged in the center of the endless primal chaos divine fire. His body was charred black, and not a single piece of intact flesh could be found. He was like an old monk in meditation, or an ancient Buddha undergoing nirvana. There wasn't the slightest movement. In fact, even his breathing and heartbeat were so weak that they were close to non-existent. If someone was present, They would even mistakenly think that Yiguchen's body was a charred black statue. And in this state of death, Yiguchen's Dantian began to undergo earth-shaking changes. Inside his Dantian and God dwellings, a miniature world seemed to be evolving. At the bottom of the divine dwelling, there was earth chi flowing, condensing into hard earth. The river formed by the mysterious origin heavy water flowed in the divine dwelling, and was burned by the primal chaos divine fire. It turned into mist and rushed to the top of the divine dwelling, as if turning into clouds and the firmament. And the primal chaos divine fire urged the flow of air, as if igniting the vitality of the entire divine dwelling. In some ancient records, the world was composed of the 4 great elements of earth, water, fire, and wind. The 4 elements formed the entire world. And at this moment, just as the world began to evolve in Yiguchen's divine dwelling, the order of the entire divine dwelling suddenly became chaotic, and the structure began to become unstable. The reason was very simple. This was because Yiguchen's divine dwelling still lacked the wind element. Without one element, the entire world would be incomplete, and it would begin to collapse. Rumble. In the end, the world in Yiguchen's divine dwelling didn't completely take shape, and only a prototype was formed. And it was also the moment the prototype world was formed that Yiguchen erupted with an extremely powerful aura. His cultivation level began to loosen, and he smoothly broke through to the 7th layer of the divine dwelling. Because he had only formed the prototype world of the divine dwelling, and hadn't transformed into a true world-level divine dwelling, Yiguchen's cultivation base had only broken through a small realm. However, it was conceivable that Yiguchen's cultivation would soar when Yiguchen truly condensed a world-class divine dwelling. After the transformation of the embryonic divine dwelling world was completed, Yiguchen's body finally began to move. He slowly stood up. A cracking sound came from the charred surface of his body. A layer of charred dead skin cracked and fell off, revealing his fair skin. Finally, the charred surface of Yiguchen's body peeled off completely, revealing his perfect figure. His figure was tall and slender, and his body was well proportioned. He did not have any explosive muscles, but the power that was faintly hidden within him was something that could not be ignored. This time, the benefits of Yiguchen's tribulation were not limited to merely forming the embryonic form of a divine dwelling world. At the same time, the primal chaos divine flame tempered Yiguchen's body. His physical body seemed to be showing signs of transforming into a 3-star ancient god. Of course, it was obviously not that simple to truly transform into a 3-star ancient god. Now, I finally understand why the world god's abode is called the legendary god's abode, Yiguchen whispered. This was because, to a certain extent, the world divine dwelling was somewhat similar to the sacred emperor realm of the thousand-leaf saint emperor. But it should be said that Yiguchen was a divine dwelling stage expert, and the thousand-leaf saint emperor was an immortal saint emperor. The gap between these 2 stages could not be described as a chasm. It was simply impossible to compare them together. But the world divine dwelling allowed Yiguchen at the divine dwelling stage to faintly form the embryonic form of the sacred emperor realm. Wasn't this cheating? If I condense the world divine dwelling and use it to suppress the enemy, wouldn't it be equivalent to the thousand-leaf saint emperor using the sacred emperor realm? Yiguchen exhaled deeply. He finally understood the heaven-defying aspect of the world divine dwelling. This was equivalent to allowing Yiguchen to comprehend the world laws of the immortal saint emperor level at the divine dwelling stage. Wasn't this heaven-defying? The 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra is indeed worthy of being called a supreme cultivation technique. Yiguchen slowly suppressed the shock in his heart. It could be said that Yiguchen was only 1 step away from transforming into a world divine dwelling. But Yiguchen's harvest this time was far more than that. His eyes, with a hint of a smile, looked at the 10,000-year-old fire spirit that was frozen in the void not far away. If the 10,000-year-old fire spirit was a human, then its expression at this moment must be one of bewilderment. This lowly and insignificant human martial art practitioner in front of it had actually survived its chaos divine flame. Not only that, but the chaos divine fire also seemed to have no effect on him. The 10,000-year-old fire spirit seemed to be in disbelief. It opened its mouth and roared, spitting out another pillar of fire. However, the pillar of fire did not cause the slightest harm to Yiguchen when it fell on his body. Not even a strand of his hair was burnt. Yiguchen's lips curved in a faint smile. Amidst the astonishment of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit, he slowly lifted his hand. A wisp of multicolored divine flame that looked like primal chaos appeared between his fingers. Just as the wisp of chaos divine fire appeared, the 10,000-year-old fire spirit roared violently, as though it was venting the shock and disbelief in its heart. In its opinion, other than itself, it was impossible for anyone to control the chaos divine fire. However, the human in front of it controlled it. With the 10,000-year-old fire spirit's low intelligence, it could not understand the situation at all. Yiguchen wore a faint smile on his face. The divine dwellings in his body had been refined by the chaos divine fire. Naturally, they would not be harmed by the chaos divine fire. Even like the Shenyuan heavy water, Yiguchen could control the chaos divine fire. Moreover, as the power of the chaos divine fire was too overbearing, the Nirvana demonic flame and Daluo void incineration flame in Yiguchen's body were swallowed by the chaos divine fire. As long as it was related to flames, it would be refined by the chaos divine fire. Therefore, Yiguchen only had one type of flame in his body, and that was the chaos divine fire. However, the chaos divine fire was many times stronger than the Daluo void incineration flame and Nirvana demonic flame combined. There was no comparison between the two. At this moment, Yiguchen stared thoughtfully at the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. The 10,000-year-old fire spirit trembled all over. Apart from the chaos divine fire, it had no other means to fight against its enemy. In other words, it was no threat to Yiguchen at all. However, it was possible for Yiguchen to refine it. At the thought of this, the 10,000-year-old fire spirit had a feeling of trembling. I have an idea, but I don't know if the sect master of the divine artifact sect and the others will come after me after I do this. Yiguchen chuckled softly. If the 10,000-year-old fire spirit was gone, Gu Beihan would probably want to kill him. Unfortunately, according to Yiguchen's plan, he would need the 10,000-year-old fire spirit's power to forge the sword with the forbidden art. Yiguchen's chaos divine fire alone would not be enough. Everyone in the outside world probably thinks that I've died. It's time to go out. Yiguchen thought to himself as he changed into a black robe. His figure was slender and his eyes were calm. He stepped into the void and walked out of the bronze pagoda. Chapter 1361. Outside the bronze tower. The current situation seemed to have been settled. Gu Beihan's eyes were filled with worry and helplessness. First Elder Yang Qi's face was dark and he didn't say a word. Song Feichen's face was ashen and his eyes were filled with resentment. In his opinion, Yiguchen wanted to teach him a lesson even if he was dead. Because of him, his hands were crippled and he lost the chance to compete for the championship. Father, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Gu Xiangling walked to Gu Beihan's side after the competition ended. Her beautiful face was filled with worry. She had used all her strength to forge a quasi-tribulation weapon. For someone her age, it was already extremely outstanding. Unfortunately, there was still Nangong Ju Yun, who was even more monstrous. He had dual supreme-grade rare flames and a god-grade forging technique. Nangong Ju Yun was undoubtedly a top-tier forging genius. Whether it was in the past or now, the outcome hasn't changed. Xiao Gongshu smiled slightly, completely relaxing his mind. In the beginning, he didn't take Yiguchen seriously. However, when Yiguchen displayed surprising abilities, Xiao Gongshin couldn't help but take him seriously. But now the outcome was set. His disciple, Nangong Ju Yun, would become the junior sect master of the divine artifact sect. Duan Tianfeng didn't say a word. It was just that his already aged face appeared even more tired. There was also a hint of self-blame in his eyes. What he cared about the most now was Yiguchen's life and death, not the result of the competition. For Duan Tianfeng, as long as Yiguchen could survive, he didn't care if he lost the competition or the bet. When Nangong Huajing saw Duan Tianfeng's expression, a trace of pity flashed across her eyes. She no longer had any feelings for Duan Tianfeng. But they did have a beautiful past. Senior brother Duan, Huajing said before that we should let bygones be bygones. Isn't it good to let go of your obsession and live in seclusion? If that was the case, things wouldn't have turned out this way and Yi Guchen wouldn't have died. Nangong Huajing thought that she was comforting Duan Tianfeng. However, when he heard the words Yi Guchen, Duan Tianfeng retorted as if he was provoked. That's impossible. Yi Guchen has his own plans. He didn't even die when the 3 overlord forces tried to kill him on the Tianhuang plains. How could he die here? Duan Tianfeng refused to believe it. Sigh, senior brother Duan, you're still as stubborn as ever, refusing to accept the truth. Nangong Huajing shook her head slightly. However, just as she finished speaking, an indifferent voice suddenly sounded. Oh, the truth? What kind of facts? Hearing this, Nangong Huajing was slightly stunned. However, when Gu Xiangling heard this voice, her beautiful eyes could not help but widen. Her clear eyes were filled with unexpected joy. Many people present were also stunned. Their gazes simultaneously turned towards the source of the sound. It was inside the cave of the giant bronze tower. This can't be, can it? An elder's eyes almost popped out of their sockets as he gasped. They could not believe it, but that voice did indeed come from inside the cave. Thousands of eyes fell on the entrance of the cave at the same time. Under everyone's shocked and incredulous gazes, a young man in a black robe stepped out calmly. His black hair fluttered in the wind, his eyes were calm, and his handsome face was very calm. Who else could it be but Yi Guchen? Yi Guchen! Everyone was in an uproar. It was as if a pot had exploded. Everyone stared at Yi Guchen as if they had seen a ghost. Didn't they say that even supremacies and pseudo-saints would be killed inside? What was going on now? Compared to the shock of the onlookers, the elders of the divine artifact sect, Yang Qi, and Gu Beihan were also a bit stunned. They often came to the heavenly cauldron to forge, so they were very clear about the power of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. That was the chaos divine fire. It was more powerful than a supreme-grade rare flame. Even Gu Beihan did not pay attention to the chaos divine fire, because he knew that it was impossible. A 10,000-year-old fire spirit was not something that ordinary people could subdue. That was why Gu Beihan and the others were so shocked. The chaos divine fire's rampage also indirectly meant that Yi Guchen had indeed encountered a 10,000-year-old fire spirit. They could not imagine how Yi Guchen had survived. What is going on? Why is he still alive? Song Feichen's face froze, and then he felt as if his head was about to explode. His hands were crippled by the chaos divine fire and he was disqualified from the competition. But now, Yi Guchen walked out of the bronze tower as if nothing had happened. Who the fuck could stand this? Song Feichen felt like he was going crazy. He was affected by the chaos divine fire and became so miserable, but Yi Guchen was safe and sound. Song Feichen was not the only one who was shocked. Nangong Juyun's mind was also shaken, and his hands almost became unsteady. How is this possible? The veins on Nangong Juyun's temples throbbed. This Yi Guchen was too lucky. Meanwhile, Duan Tianfeng, Gu Xiangling, and the divine Eagle Blackie all breathed a long sigh of relief. Especially Duan Tianfeng, whose self-blame and dejection were swept away. Although he did not know how Yi Guchen could come out alive, this was naturally the best outcome. Yi Guchen looked at Nangong Huajing indifferently and said, "I'm sorry to disappoint you that I didn't die in the bronze tower." Humph. Xiao Gongsheng flicked his sleeves and did not say a word with a cold face. He was also in disbelief and had many questions in his heart. But he obviously could not bring himself to ask Yi Guchen. Nangong Huajing was speechless by Yi Guchen's question. Her beautiful face alternated between green and white, and she was very embarrassed. Just now, she said that she wanted Duan Tianfeng to admit the fact that Yi Guchen had died. In the end, Yi Guchen immediately came out of the bronze tower. That was a slap in the face. But soon, Nangong Huajing adjusted and said, "Yi Guchen, you're indeed very unexpected. I'm afraid no one expected you to come out alive." But so what? The result of the junior sect master selection has been decided. There's no suspense. Many people nodded in agreement with Nangong Huajing's words. Indeed, Nangong Juyun was almost firmly in the position of junior sect master now. Even if Yi Guqin came out alive, what was the use? He could not win if he wanted to. Duan Tianfeng also shook his head and sighed. That's enough, little Yi. It's good that you're safe. At most, we won't compete in this competition. If we lose the bet, so be it. Perhaps it's time to accept our fate. If Yi Guqin met with an accident because of him, Duan Tianfeng could not escape the blame. Therefore, Duan Tianfeng was willing to give up the bet. Senior Duan Tianfeng, this doesn't seem like your style. Yi Guqin suddenly smiled. Everyone was stunned when they saw Yi Guqin smile. That was because his smile was full of confidence. Yi Guqin will not accept my fate. Even if it's a taboo that defies the heavens, I will still forge a peerless weapon. Yi Guqin said firmly. He raised his hand and his black hair danced wildly. A blood-red aura was emitted from Yi Guqin's body, causing the heavens and earth to shake and the sky to change colors. The taboo forging technique. Duan Tianfeng's heart trembled violently. Was Yi Guqin going to use the taboo forging technique that even he had never used before? Chapter 1362. The word taboo was the most prominent feature of a taboo art. A taboo art was comparable to a god-tier art, and to a certain extent, it was even slightly more dangerous than a god-tier art. However, it was far more dangerous than a god-tier art. If a god-tier art failed, the worst that could happen was that the weapon would be scrapped. However, if a taboo art failed, it would usually cause a lot of harm to the artificer. A light injury could result in injury, while a heavy injury could result in death. It was precisely because taboo arts were extremely rare and had severe side effects that they were almost extinct among artificers. Generally speaking, only a madman would think of using a taboo art to forge a weapon. At this moment, everyone present was frozen in place when they sensed Yi Guqin's aura. This was especially true for those from Divine Artifact sect. Their eyes were wide open and filled with shock. What kind of art is Yi Guqin trying to use? This aura is definitely not an ordinary art. It's not even a god-tier art. Yang Qi's heart trembled violently as he couldn't help but exclaim. Could it be a taboo art? Gu Beihan's eyes flickered with uncertainty as he spoke. What? A taboo art? Some of the elders of Divine Artifact sect gasped, their eyes filled with shock. A taboo art? What is a taboo art? Some of the spectators were puzzled. A taboo art is an extremely dangerous art. A light injury could result in the artificer's injury, while a heavy injury could result in death. However, a taboo art like this is usually comparable to a god-tier art, an elder of Divine Artifact sect explained. What? It's that dangerous? Is Yi Guqin trying to put his life on the line? Some of the spectators turned pale with fright after hearing the explanation. They didn't expect that a mere forging competition would put one's life in danger. Gu Xiangling's face paled slightly. She naturally knew how dangerous a taboo art was. Moreover, given the aura Yi Guqin was emitting, this taboo art was clearly the best, but also the most dangerous. Young Master Yi, you don't have to do this, Gu Xiangling said with a pale face. Was it worth it to put his life on the line for the position of junior sect master? Duan Tianfeng's emotions were also swaying. When he first met Yi Guqin and passed on his forbidden forging technique, he had indeed wanted Yi Guqin to use this forging technique to help him win the bet he had lost to Elder Xiao. However, after such a long time, Duan Tianfeng and Yi Guqin had already developed a master-disciple relationship. Now, he would rather lose the bet than let Yi Guqin take the risk. Little Yi, you don't have to do this. Duan Tianfeng sighed. Yi Guqin's expression did not change as he said, Senior, this Yi is not doing this for you. I am also determined to forge a divine weapon that belongs to me. Yi Guqin had been planning to forge his own divine weapon for a long time. It was just that he didn't have the conditions and opportunity to do so. How could Yi Guqin miss out on such a good opportunity? As for the danger of the taboo forging technique, If Yiguchen was afraid of danger, he would not have entered the giant bronze pagoda at all. Duan Tianfeng opened his mouth slightly when he saw the determination in Yiguchen's eyes, but in the end he did not say anything. This was Yiguchen's determination. You actually passed on the taboo forging technique to him. This is indeed unexpected. Elder Zhao's expression was unprecedentedly cold. He had thought that Nangong Ju-yun would definitely win the position of junior sect master. However, Yiguchen walked out of the giant bronze pagoda alive, which exceeded Elder Zhao's expectations. Now, he had even used the taboo forging technique. Even Xiao Gonggong felt a faint sense of unease in his heart. Yiguchen was the one who had been plotting for such a long time. Would there be any problems because of him? Nangong Huajing's heart was also not calm. Both of them felt a trace of uneasiness in their hearts. So what if it's the taboo forging technique? Yiguchen, with your strength, can you unleash the power of the taboo forging technique? Don't die before the divine weapon is forged. Nangong Ju-yun sneered. If everyone could succeed in using the taboo forging technique, it would not be called a taboo forging technique. Furthermore, Yiguchen was not a blacksmith. Forging was just his side job. In Nangong Ju-yun's opinion, the success rate of using the taboo forging technique was much lower than using the divine grade forging technique. Only an ignorant person would recklessly guess the abilities of others. If you can't do it, then shut up. Yiguchen's tone was cold as he ignored Nangong Ju-yun. Fine, I want to see if your taboo forging technique or my divine grade forging technique is stronger. Nangong Ju-yun threw caution to the wind. This time, he had to succeed in forging the divine weapon. Sun and Moon refining primary pole. Nangong Ju-yun activated the true Yang mystic flame and the extreme Yin frost flame with both hands. All sorts of sacred materials and supreme-grade treasures floated within the flames. Vaguely, it seemed as if two divine swords were about to be formed. Many people's gazes fell on Yiguchen. Although Yiguchen is going to use the taboo forging technique, the grade of his flames is slightly lower than Nangong Ju-yun's. Yeah, although the origin void incineration flame is comparable to Nangong Ju-yun's two flames, the silent destruction demonic flame is still slightly weaker. Just as everyone was discussing, Yiguchen slowly raised his hand. Boom! A loud explosion was heard as a colorful, chaotic flame burst out from the ground. As soon as the flames appeared, even the void seemed to be slightly distorted by the heat. This flame is... When they saw Yiguchen take out the chaos divine flame, the entire place fell silent. The eyes of some blacksmiths from the divine weapon sect almost popped out of their sockets. Pinch me. Is what I'm seeing real? The chaos divine flame. Yiguchen took out the chaos divine flame of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. Screams and cries of surprise rose in all directions. Everyone was dumbfounded, their eyes wide open. Even the spectators and outsiders had seen Nangong Ju-yun, Song Feichen, and the others struggling to borrow the chaos divine flame. But now, Yiguchen casually took out the chaos divine flame. This, not to mention the onlookers, even Gu Beihin's expression became interesting. He even wanted to grab Yiguchen and ask him how he had obtained the chaos divine flame. As for Song Feichen, it was as if he had lost his soul. His eyes were dull, and he couldn't believe his eyes. His hands had been burned by the chaos divine flame. Yiguchen had taken control of the chaos divine flame. This made Song Feichen's heart completely turn to ash. He couldn't compare to Yiguchen. Duan Tianfeng, Gu Xiangling, and the others were also in disbelief, but they were happy for Yiguchen. The chaos divine flame was definitely a rare weapon for blacksmiths. It was far better than a supreme rare flame. Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Huajing were petrified. They stood rooted to the ground, their expressions unprecedentedly stiff. Of course, their shock couldn't compare to Nangong Ju-yun's. Because he was Yiguchen's opponent. Yiguchen taking out the chaos divine flame was like a bolt from the blue for Nangong Ju-yun. Because, when the chaos divine flame appeared, all flames would submit. Chapter 1363. Nangong Ju-yun could clearly feel it when Yiguchen took out the Chaos Divine Fire. His true Sun Mystic Fire and Sun Frosty Flames seemed to be suppressed and started to tremble. If the Supreme Grade Rare Fire was the noblest among flames, the Chaos Divine Fire was the king of flames. Once the Chaos Divine Fire appeared, all flames would submit to it. Chaos Divine Fire, how did you manage to control the Chaos Divine Fire? Nangong Ju-yun stared at Yiguchen and gritted his teeth. Yiguchen had refreshed his understanding of Nangong Ju-yun. Again and again he displayed astonishing feats. At this moment, Nangong Ju-yun finally understood why Yiguchen was so famous. Yiguchen was not to be underestimated. It seems like I have underestimated you. Nangong Ju-yun gritted his teeth and felt uneasy. He had always been extremely talented and had a high status. He was the chosen one in everyone's eyes. However, Yiguchen's appearance seemed to have woken him up. Ju-yun, calm down. The forbidden forging skill is not that easy to succeed. You still have the highest chance of winning. Xiao Gongshu shouted when he saw that Nangong Ju-yun's emotions were unstable. That's right, Ju-yun. You still have a chance of winning. Nangong Huajing encouraged him. Nangong Ju-yun's body shook when he heard what the two of them said. He suddenly woke up. That's right. Even if Yiguchen has the Chaos Divine Fire, the success rate of him executing the forbidden forging skill is very low. However, I have a 60 to 70% chance of succeeding. Nangong Ju-yun's eyes were bright. After all, he was one of the 10 great young masters. He quickly adjusted his state of mind. Yiguchen, don't even think about shaking my determination to win. Nangong Ju-yun took a deep breath and stopped being affected. He started to focus on forging his weapon. Yiguchen smiled and shook his head when he heard that. Some people would not cry until they saw the coffin. At the thought of this, Yiguchen did not hesitate any longer. He took out all sorts of forging treasured materials and began the final forging. Human Soul Forging Sword, Sword and Life Dual Cultivation. That was the name of the forbidden forging skill. One could only forge one weapon in one's lifetime using this forging skill. When the weapon was completed, Yiguchen would not be able to use this forbidden forging skill to forge other weapons. It was as though they were a couple for the rest of their lives. However, the target weapon. Of course, if Yiguchen obtained other forbidden forging skills in the future, he could still use it. However, this taboo forging technique could only be used to forge this weapon. Next was the forging skill. Forging was. The higher grade divine weapon was Forging Weapons was Forging Yun's weapon. However, none of them were Su Yun's Yun. They to Yu Yun Yun Yun. This was because the young master of divine artifact sect would be chosen between the two of them. Yiguchen, can you impress me? Gu Beihan murmured in his heart. He Chen Chen Zichen lose Chen Gu to him, but he was he God hearing him Godling Yichen? Gu Beihan did not give a clear answer. It was too troublesome for Yiguchen to become Yu Su Su's Yu Su Su. However, if Yiguchen's performance could make him look at him in a different light, then why not? Those overlords would not be so stupid as to destroy divine weapon sect, would they? In the end, Gu Beihan did not want to cause any more trouble. Now, Gu Beihan was quietly watching the final battle between the two. Yiguchen began to focus on forging the rough divine weapon. The 9-orifice divine stone that he had fused with the weapon could allow it to cultivate like a human. The mica spirit containing saliva could give the weapon spirituality. The zenith heaven metal could give the weapon natural Taoist rhymes. The tribulation blue gold could give the weapon the ability to resist tribulation lightning. The void mother gold could make the weapon lighter and could even pierce through the void in the future. In short, Yiguchen had made full use of every divine weapon. On the other hand, Nangong Ju-yun was not to be outdone. He had 2 sword prototypes floating in the flames. Vaguely, 2 completely opposite sword chis burst out. On the other hand, Yiguchen was also forging a sword. Tsk, these two are really at odds with each other. They're both forging swords. Some people exclaimed when they saw this. When the time came, the swords they forged would be a competition. Time passed. 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. During these 7 days, Yiguchen had been forging the sword prototypes. As for his forbidden forging technique, it was not complete yet. On the other hand, Nangong Juyun's weapon was about to take shape. Finally, at a certain moment, 2 violent roars rang out from the sea of flames. What's going on? It's Nangong Juyun. His weapon is complete. He actually succeeded. That's a god-tier forging technique. There was an uproar as everyone's eyes widened. Even Gu Beihan, Yang Qi, and the others turned their gazes over. The weapon is complete. Nangong Juyun was excited. He raised his hands and 2 swords burst out from the sea of flames. One of the swords was like a red jade. Flames flowed around it as if it was reflecting the light of the sun. As for the other sword, it looked like it was carved out of ice crystals. It gave off a bone-chilling aura. As soon as the 2 divine weapons appeared, all the attention in the world was taken away by them. Yin-yang dual swords, complete. Nangong Juyun looked up to the sky and roared. In an instant, dark clouds rolled in the sky and thunder surged. Could that be? It can't be. After being baptized by the heavenly tribulation, young Master Nangong actually forged a heavenly tribulation weapon. A cry filled with disbelief rang out. The entire place was in an uproar. Everyone was shocked. No one had expected Nangong Juyun to be able to forge a heavenly tribulation weapon. This was simply heaven-defying. It was terrifying. Rumble. Lightning flashed between the dark clouds. Then, silver lightning poured down. Nangong Juyun's yin-yang dual swords trembled under the baptism of the heavenly tribulation. You must make it through. Nangong Huajing could not help but clench her fists. Xiao Gongsheng's breathing quickened. After all, they had planned this for a long time. Success or failure depended on this. If Nangong Juyun successfully passed the heavenly tribulation weapon, it would mean that he had successfully forged a heavenly tribulation weapon. If he failed to pass the heavenly tribulation weapon would be destroyed. Gu Beihan, Gu Xiangling, Yang Qi, and the others had some hope that the heavenly tribulation weapon would not be able to pass. In such a tense and torturous situation, finally, the dark clouds began to disperse. The heavenly tribulation also dissipated. The yin-yang dual swords had successfully passed the heavenly tribulation. They had become a heavenly tribulation weapon. An uproar sounded in all directions. That's great. Even with Duke Xiao's shrewdness, he couldn't help but smile. Did it succeed? Gu Xiangling's beautiful eyes were dazed. This meant that she would be forced to marry Nangong Juyun in the future. Ah, that's great. The heavenly tribulation weapon has been forged. Yiguchen, what are you going to use to fight me? Nangong Juyun looked up to the sky and laughed. Yiguchen's expression did not change. A heavenly tribulation weapon? It's not bad, but the weapon that I, Yiguchen, forge will belong to me. It will be a unique and unparalleled weapon. Yiguchen's eyes sparkled. Chapter 1364. The yin-yang twin swords that Nangong Juyun had forged floated in the air, radiating with sword qi as if they were announcing his success. Yiguchen, what's the point of continuing to forge now? After forging the heavenly tribulation divine weapon, Nangong Juyun was completely relaxed. His expression was calm as if he could see the dawn of victory. Do you think you can rest easy after forging the heavenly tribulation divine weapon? Yiguchen sneered. What do you mean? Nangong Juyun frowned slightly. Did Yiguchen think that he could forge a heavenly tribulation divine weapon that was more powerful than the yin-yang dual swords? Nangong Juyun was not the only one who was confused. The other spectators were also confused. They did not even know if Yiguchen's heavenly tribulation divine weapon would succeed, let alone be compared to Nangong Juyun's yin-yang dual swords. Everyone around the heavenly cauldron was in a heated discussion. However, these noises did not affect Yiguchen. At that moment, he was fully focused on forging the heavenly tribulation divine weapon. Rumble. At a certain moment, the sword embryo began to form. As soon as it was formed, a terrifying sword qi gushed out, causing the air to emit a clanging sound. It's really something. Gu Beihan raised his eyebrows when he saw that. From the sword embryo, he could feel a chill that would make one's heart tremble. It was only the sword embryo, but it already had such power. How powerful would it be when it was fully formed? Impossible. Nangong Ju Yun's eyes narrowed. He would not believe that Yi Guchen could forge a heavenly tribulation divine weapon that was better than his until he saw Yi Guchen's heavenly tribulation divine weapon. The sword embryo is finally formed. Next is, Yi Guchen's eyes lit up. In the next moment, he did something that no one expected. Sword embryo? Yi Guchen immediately took out the innate sword embryo in his dantian. The sword embryo that was entwined with chaotic energy broke through the air. It was the size of a palm and was sparkling like jade. It flickered with a chaotic sharpness, as if it could cut through the void. Yi Guchen's innate mystique, the innate sword embryo. Why did he summon his own sword embryo? Many people cried out in alarm, unable to understand. Could it be that he wants to? Gu Beihan seemed to have thought of something as his expression froze. If that was really the case, then Yi Guchen was plotting something big. What he wanted to forge was not just an ordinary divine weapon, but a weapon that he could perfectly control and whose attributes were completely compatible with him. If one had to describe it, the divine weapons forged by ordinary blacksmiths were the common version. On the other hand, the divine weapon that Yi Guchen forged was a custom-made version that was exclusive to him. The custom version was obviously more difficult to forge than the general version. Go! Yi Guchen used his fingers as a sword. Following his guidance, the innate sword embryo merged into the sword embryo. What is Yi Guchen trying to do? Why did he merge his innate sword embryo into the rough sword embryo? Those onlookers who did not know what was going on all cried out in alarm. Innate mystique could be said to be the core skill of a prodigy. They did not expect Yi Guchen to merge his innate sword embryo into his divine weapon. Could it be that he wants to? Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Huajing's expressions froze at almost the same time. With their experience in forging, they naturally knew what Yi Guchen was trying to do. Impossible. Even I would find it extremely difficult to forge such a divine weapon, let alone Yi Guchen. Moreover, it's impossible for him to perfectly merge his innate sword embryo and the rough sword embryo, Xiao Gongshu said coldly. His words immediately caused the surrounding people to react. I see. Yi Guchen's scheme is so big. Can he really forge it? Didn't you hear Master Xiao Gongshu say that it's difficult to merge an innate sword embryo and a rough sword embryo? I'm afraid Yi Guchen is going to make a fool of himself. The uproar in the surroundings was like a tidal wave rising. It was really because Yi Guchen's actions were too shocking. No one had expected him to do this. Forge a divine weapon that belongs to oneself? Yi Guchen, are you kidding? Even some 8-star forging grandmasters have a pitifully low success rate. Nangong Ju Yun's face was cold when he found out. He did not think that Yi Guchen had the ability to forge such a divine weapon. Yi Guchen did not say a word. He ignored the clamor outside and began to merge his innate sword embryo into the rough sword embryo. At the moment of merging, the innate sword embryo and the rough sword embryo produced a strong repulsive force. The innate sword embryo was Yi Guchen's innate mystique. As for the sword's rough embryo, it was made of various sacred materials. Both of them were extremely powerful. When they merged, there would definitely be a repulsive force. Neither of them would submit to the other. As expected. Xiao Gongshu's lips curled up into a cold smile. With his experience, he naturally knew that Yi Guchen's success rate was close to zero. Sigh, Yi Guchen is still too impulsive. Gu Beihan saw this and shook his head slightly. Even Gu Beihan himself could not guarantee that he would succeed in forging a divine weapon. Yi Guchen? Gu Xiangling's beautiful eyes were fixed on Yi Guchen. If Yi Guchen could really succeed today, he would have created another miracle. Clang, clang, in the void, sword chi intertwined. The innate sword embryo and the rough sword embryo resisted each other and could not merge. Yi Guchen's expression remained calm. In fact, he had already expected this to happen. Just when everyone thought that Yiguchen's efforts would be in vain, Yiguchen suddenly raised his hand and the chaos divine flame surged out. Seeing this, Nangong Juyun's lips curled up into a cold smile. Using the chaos divine flame? Unfortunately, with your strength, even if you use the chaos divine flame, you will not succeed. Nangong Juyun was not the only one who thought this. Xiao Gongshu, Nangong Huajing, and the elders of the divine artifact sect all thought the same. The chaos divine flame was indeed powerful, but Yiguchen's current strength was not enough to fully unleash its power. However, Yiguchen's lips curled into a smile. His hair fluttered in the wind, and his eyes seemed to be burning with multicolored chaos divine flames. 10,000-year-old fire spirit, come out. Yiguchen let out a long howl that seemed to shake the stars in the sky. At the same time, Yiguchen activated the embryonic form of his world divine dwelling. It also contained the power of the chaos divine flame. It could be said that Yiguchen was the only person who was qualified to completely refine and control the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. He was not afraid that the 10,000-year-old fire spirit would not listen to him. What kind of nonsense is Yiguchen talking about? Everyone was stunned. Gu Beihan and the others were even more confused. If the 10,000-year-old fire spirit was so obedient, there would be no need to suppress it with the giant bronze tower. However, as soon as Yiguchen finished speaking, the entire bronze pagoda shook violently. Then the second time. A third time. Finally, under everyone's shocked and dazed gazes, the giant bronze tower cracked and then started to collapse. An endless amount of primal chaos divine flame surged out, and a strange fire spirit that looked like a qilin roared at the sky while engulfed in divine flames. Chapter 1365. The primal chaos divine fire roiled in the air. The 10,000-year-old fire spirit that looked like a qilin broke out of the tower and appeared in front of everyone. Everyone was stunned. At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded. The expressions on their faces froze at the same time. The giant bronze tower had been passed down from the ancestors of the divine artifact sect to suppress the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. But now, the 10,000-year-old fire spirit had destroyed it. Most importantly, the 10,000-year-old fire spirit seemed to have broken out of the tower because of Yiguchen's summons. This was simply inconceivable and unbelievable. Gu Beihan opened his mouth slightly, but he was speechless and could not say anything. The 10,000-year-old fire spirit was the foundation of the divine artifact sect, but now, it had broken out of seclusion because of Yiguchen. Yang Qi, Song Feichen, and the others were also stunned. Even Duan Tianfeng, Gu Xiangling and the rest, who were on Yiguchen's side, were in a daze. Clearly, they had never expected this to happen. How is this possible? How can he control the 10,000-year-old fire spirit? Even Xiao Gongqing was shocked. If the 10,000-year-old fire spirit could be controlled so easily, he would have been tempted long ago. Nangong Huajing covered her mouth with her hand, shocked beyond words. As for Nangong Juyun, he seemed to have lost his soul. Yiguchen had exceeded his expectations time and time again. He was almost numb to it. Everyone was shocked. At the same time, they were wondering what Yiguchen's next move was. Yiguchen raised his hand and beckoned. The 10,000-year-old fire spirit seemed to be driven by him. It rushed directly toward the innate sword embryo and the sword embryo. I understand now. Yiguchen wants to use the 10,000-year-old fire spirit's power to fuse the innate sword embryo with the embryo. An elder of the divine artifact sect shouted. This kind of spending could not be said to be small. No, he was using the resources of the divine artifact sect to forge a sword for himself. Yiguchen, you're really something, aren't you? Even my divine artifact sect has fallen into your trap? Gu Beihan shook his head and sighed. He finally understood why Yiguchen was here to participate in the young sect master selection. It wasn't just to help Mo Tianfeng win the bet. He also wanted to obtain the identity of the young sect master to reduce the pressure on him. Now, even the 10,000-year fire spirit was used by him to forge a sword for him. It could be said that Divine Tool Sect had completely given Yiguchen a gift. But he couldn't blame Yiguchen. I finally know why even the Overlord class factions have to suffer in front of this kid. He's so meticulous. Duan Tianfeng, your standards are still as high as ever. Gu Beihan sighed and looked at Duan Tianfeng. Hee, this kid is always unexpected. I'm getting used to it. Mo Tianfeng laughed. Then, everyone's eyes gathered on Yi Guqin. Because as long as his results were out, the entire young sect master selection would be almost certain. The 10,000-year fire spirit's lifeline was in Yi Guqin's hands. Therefore, no matter how unwilling it was, it could only forge a sword for Yi Guqin. The 10,000-year fire spirit was a spiritual intelligence derived from the chaos divine fire. The energy it contained far surpassed Yi Guqin's. The violent chaos divine fire burned the innate sword embryo and the sword embryo. With the support of the 10,000-year fire spirit's energy, the two slowly merged together. With the innate sword embryo as the core, the sword embryo was wrapped around the outside. The innate sword embryo itself had the attributes of sharpness and indestructibility. It was even better than the best divine tool. This time, Nangong Ju Yun panicked. Finally, at some point, the innate sword embryo and the sword embryo completely merged together. In an instant, the sound of the sword resonated in the 9 heavens. Everyone seemed to hear the sound of the sword resonating in their ears. 10,000-year fire spirit, merge. Yi Guqin shouted coldly once again. After the fusion, a burst of light burst out from the sword. The 10,000-year fire spirit roared, but it was still absorbed into the sword embryo. Everyone was dumbfounded. Yi Guqin had sealed the 10,000-year fire spirit into the sword embryo? How could he do that? Even Nangong Ju Yun was dumbfounded. This kid. Gu Beihan was stunned. First Elder Yang Qi's eyes also popped out. Yi Guqin had sealed the 10,000-year fire spirit, the core of divine tool sect, into his sword embryo? Everyone was shocked. As for Yi Guqin, his expression was focused and he was not affected at all. If he wanted to forge a sword embryo, he naturally had to be the best in every aspect. The 10,000-year fire spirit was extremely powerful. It could be sealed into the sword embryo as a trump card. As for angering divine tool sect, Yi Guqin naturally had a way to ensure that divine tool sect could still use the chaos divine fire safely. Next, the most important step is to completely unleash the taboo forging technique. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed. He raised his hand and slapped his chest. He spat out a mouthful of his heart's blood, which splashed onto the sword embryo and sizzled. What is Yi Guqin doing? Is he harming himself? No, he's probably going to use the forbidden art. Everyone's attention was focused. Even Gu Beihan and the others temporarily put aside the matter of the 10,000-year fire spirit and watched closely. Not enough. Yi Guqin raised his eyebrows. He used some more heart's blood, but his face paled a lot. However, the sword embryo was covered in a layer of faint bloody light, as if it was resonating with Yi Guqin. Essence blood alone isn't enough. Refining a sword embryo with a human soul and dual cultivating sword embryo and life requires a soul as well. Yi Guqin gritted his teeth and the sea of consciousness in his mind began to work furiously. Then Yi Guqin split a part of his sea of consciousness origin. The last time he split his sea of consciousness origin was to refine his clone, Duguchuma. To a certain extent, this sword embryo could be considered another clone of his. The pain of splitting one's sea of consciousness origin was more painful than being torn apart by 5 horses or being cut into pieces. Even with Yi Guqin's temperament, his lips turned pale and his body trembled slightly. Splitting one's sea of consciousness origin. Heavens, he's crazy. Seeing Yi Guqin's crazy scene, everyone felt their hair stand on end. Now they knew why this art of forging was called a forbidden art. It was not something that ordinary blacksmiths could perform. If one was not careful and made a mistake, their sea of consciousness might collapse and their vitality would perish. The separated sea of consciousness origin was also integrated into the sword embryo. In an instant, Yi Guqin felt as if there was a soul link between him and the sword embryo. At this point, all the steps were finally completed. Next, there was only one last step, and that was the heavenly tribulation baptism. Rumble. Dark clouds loomed over the horizon, as if the end of the world had arrived and was about to destroy everything. Why do I feel like this heavenly tribulation is much bigger than Nangong Ju Yun's? Looking at the rolling dark clouds, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. At this moment, streaks of rainbow-colored lightning rolled in the clouds, roaring like angry dragons. Is that the rainbow lightning tribulation? Gu Beihan's heart trembled violently. As the sect master of Divine Artifact Sect, he could not help but lose his composure. Chapter 1366. As everyone knew, the reason why divine weapons of tribulation were called divine weapons of tribulation was because they were extremely powerful and could trigger the power of tribulation. As long as they could survive the tribulation, the quality of the weapon would change. The thunder tribulation that an ordinary heavenly tribulation weapon would attract was just an ordinary one. However, there were also some rare godly weapons or special godly weapons whose quality was too heaven-defying. The lightning tribulation they attracted was not ordinary lightning tribulation, but special lightning tribulation. Generally speaking, the more colors there were in the tribulation lightning, the more powerful the weapon was. However, Yiguchen's weapon had triggered the 7-colored tribulation lightning. It was unbelievable. Even Gu Beihan's eyes widened in disbelief. What kind of weapon did Yiguchen forge? The weapon I forged only triggered the 5-colored tribulation lightning at most, but this guy triggered the 7-colored tribulation lightning. Gu Beihan was shocked. He was not the only one. All the elders and disciples of the artifact sect were stunned. They could not believe what they were seeing. Who would have thought that a 6-star blacksmith could forge a weapon that triggered the 7-colored tribulation lightning? 7-colored tribulation lightning. As expected of little Yi. Duan Tianfeng could not stop laughing. It could be said that as long as Yi Guchen's magical weapon could withstand the baptism of the 7-colored thunder tribulation, the outcome of the young master selection was almost certain. Young Master Yi can create miracles no matter where he is. It's amazing. Gu Xiangling's heart was also pounding. Yi Guchen was too outstanding. He was so outstanding that even her heart was moved. 7-colored tribulation lightning. This guy triggered the 7-colored tribulation lightning. How is that possible? Xiao Gongshu's face was extremely pale. He thought that Nangong Ju Yun would be able to forge the yin-yang dual swords. However, the 7-colored tribulation lightning was like a slap to his face. Xiao Gongshu, you don't have to do this. Maybe Yi Guchen's weapon can't survive the 7-colored tribulation lightning. Nangong Huajing comforted him. However, to be honest, even she was worried. As for Nangong Ju Yun himself, his face was tense as he looked at the 7-colored tribulation lightning descending from the sky. The pride in his heart and his pride in the path of smithing were completely shattered by the 7-colored thunderbolt disaster. He dared not believe that Yi Guchen was more outstanding than him in smithing art. Impossible, it can't be. Your divine weapon can't withstand the baptism of the 7-colored lightning tribulation. Nangong Ju Yun could no longer maintain the image of a noble young master. His eyes were bloodshot, and his entire body was trembling. Everyone's gaze fell upon the divine weapon that Yi Guchen had forged. Yi Guchen stood in the air with his hands clasped behind his back. He raised his head and looked at the sky, watching the 7-colored lightning tribulation crash onto the divine weapon. Scorching lightning exploded in the void, as if it was going to blind everyone's eyes. Yi Guchen's black hair fluttered in the wind. His expression was calm and there was a hint of confidence on his face. He knew that the divine weapon he forged would not disappoint him. As expected, an endless amount of sword chi burst out in the void, shaking the surroundings. Even the 7-colored thunderbolt disaster looked like it was about to be shaken off. Moreover, Yi Guchen had fused the heavenly tribulation blue gold into the divine weapon. This kind of sacred material could greatly increase the divine weapon's ability to withstand the baptism of the lightning tribulation. Therefore, although the 7-colored thunderbolt disaster looked terrifying, it could not destroy the divine weapon that Yi Guchen had forged. Boom, boom, boom. Dark clouds rolled and lightning roared. It was as if the heavens did not want such a heaven-defying divine weapon to appear in the world, so it sent down a tribulation. However, no matter how the seven-colored thunderbolt disaster struck, it could not destroy the divine weapon. Instead, it tempered the divine weapon even more. The lightning tribulation continued for 3 days and 3 nights. In the end, the seven-colored thunderbolt disaster finally dispersed unwillingly. In the sky, a bright and dazzling sword shone with a shocking sword light. The sword was 5 feet long, and the body of the sword was dazzling. It was surrounded by the chaotic aura that belonged to the innate sword embryo. At the same time, the colorful chaotic divine flame rose from the blade of the sword. The spiritual chi in the surroundings automatically flowed into the sword. When they saw the sword, everyone's eyes were filled with amazement. It was the first time they had seen a divine weapon that could cultivate on its own and absorb the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. 100 Calamity Divine Weapon. This sword has withstood hundreds of lightning tribulations and has transformed into 100 Calamity Divine Weapon, a blacksmith said after taking a deep breath. In these 3 days and 3 nights, the sword had withstood hundreds of lightning tribulations, so it was 100 Calamity Divine Weapon. In the future, when Yiguchen found other materials and fused them into the sword, its quality would be improved. When Yiguchen saw the divine weapon, his heart stirred. As if it had been summoned, the sword broke through the air and flew toward him. It was so fast that it seemed to have traveled through the void. That was the ability given by the Void Mother Gold. Yiguchen raised his hand and the sword fell into his hand. In an instant, Yiguchen felt as if his blood was connected to the sword. This sword would accompany him on his path of swordsmanship. Yiguchen extended a finger. With a poof, a wisp of chaotic divine fire rose. Then, Yiguchen's finger landed on the end of the sword near the hilt and wrote 2 words. Seeking Defeat. From now on, this sword's name is Seeking Defeat. With a sword in hand, I only seek defeat. As soon as Yiguchen finished speaking, the Seeking Defeat sword seemed to have been summoned. The sword vibrated and countless chaotic sword rays burst out, piercing through the void. Yiguchen felt a sense of joy. It was a sense of joy that came from the sword of death-seeking. This was a sword with spirituality. What a powerful spirituality! Will this sword nurture a sword spirit in the future? If that's the case, won't it reach the level of a famed ancient sword? Some elders of the divine artifact sect were stunned. With the Seeking Defeat sword in hand, Yiguchen suddenly had a heroic aura that seemed to be able to cut through the heavens. I want this Seeking Defeat sword to be the sharpest and strongest sword in the world. Cut through the heavens and earth, cut through the sun, moon, and stars. Yiguchen's black hair danced in the wind as he stood in the sky with the sword in his hand. Everyone's hearts were filled with shock. Yiguchen was very ambitious. His expectations for the Seeking Defeat sword were not just limited to being 100 Calamity Divine Weapon. Yiguchen looked at Nangong Ju-yun, whose face was extremely pale. Nangong Ju-yun, do you still want to compete? Yiguchen's words made Nangong Ju-yun's pale face even paler. He clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Compete? How should they compete? Now, anyone with a discerning eye could see that Yiguchen's sword of begging for defeat was definitely better than his sword of yin and yang. The result of the Young Sect Master Selection had been completely decided. No, I won't accept this. Nangong Ju-yun stared at Yiguchen. Alright, I'll make you accept this. Seeing this, Yiguchen said coldly and swung his hand. The Seeking Defeat sword slashed at the yin-yang dual swords with a monstrous chaotic sword ray. Clang. The sound of metal clashing reverberated between heaven and earth. Chapter 1367. Sparks flew as sword radiance filled the sky. Yiguchen did not hesitate at all. He immediately took out the sword of defeat and clashed with Nangong Ju-yun's yin-yang dual swords. This was the simplest and most direct way to test the quality of a divine weapon. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the yin-yang dual swords were sent flying by the sword of defeat. A huge crack appeared on the body of the sword. One could imagine that the sword of defeat could break the yin-yang dual swords if they clashed 2 more times. The quality of the divine weapon was obvious. Nangong Ju-yun felt as if a fishbone was stuck in his throat and he could not utter a single word. "Are you satisfied now?" Yi Guchen said indifferently. Nangong Ju-yun's face turned purple as he looked at the yin-yang dual swords that were covered in cracks. His body trembled. He had lost. Nangong Ju-yun, who was said to be invincible in the art of forging, had lost in the end. Even his Tao heart had started to crack because of this cruel reality. As one of the 10 great young masters and born in a top overlord family, Nangong Ju-yun's life had always been smooth sailing. This was the first time he had suffered such a crushing defeat. How could this be? Nangong Huajing's face turned pale. Meanwhile, Xiao Gongshu's face was so gloomy that it could drip water. Their painstaking plan had been ruined because of Yi Guchen's appearance. This was not just a failure. It was also related to whether Xiao Gongshu could control Divine Weapon Sect. However, all their plans had been ruined because of Yi Guchen. Gu Beihan did not know what to feel when he saw this result. He was relieved that Nangong Ju-yun did not win the position of young sect master. However, Yi Guchen would be troublesome if he became the young sect master. Not to mention that he had taken away the 10,000-year fire spirit of Divine Weapon Sect. Although Yi Guchen's performance had surprised Gu Beihan, it could not make up for the trouble that Yi Guchen had brought. Gu Beihan sighed in his heart, but he still had to announce the result. He took a step forward and said, "Everyone, I'm sure everyone is well aware of the results of the young sect master selection. So, this sect master announces." Just as Gu Beihan was about to announce the result, Xiao Gongshu stepped forward and said, "Sect master, please wait. I feel that there is still room for discussion in this competition." Gu Beihan frowned slightly. Duan Tianfeng also raised his eyebrows. He had also expected that Master Xiao would not give up so easily after losing. "What do you mean by that?" Gu Beihan asked in a low voice. Xiao Gongshu's expression was indifferent as he asked. When this fellow was smithing, he integrated his innate divine ability, the innate sword embryo. I wonder if this is in accordance with the rules. Furthermore, he sealed the 10,000-year-old fire spirit of our sect into his own sword without permission. This alone is a great crime, enough to strip him of all qualifications. Master Zhao's words caused the surroundings to fall silent for a moment. The so-called innate sword embryo was Yi Guchen's divine ability in the first place. He could use it if he wanted to. Xiao Gongshu was just twisting words and twisting logic. As for the 10,000-year-old fire spirit, Yi Guchen was indeed responsible for it, but this would have to be discussed later. Moreover, if Yi Guchen became the young sect master of Divine Artifact Sect, the 10,000-year-old fire spirit would not be considered an outsider. In short, if Master Xiao lost, he was just being picky and didn't want to admit the final result. "Master Xiao, can you be any more shameless?" Duan Tianfeng was so angry that he stomped his foot. Even Nangong Huajing's beautiful face looked a little unnatural. Master Zhao's method was indeed disgraceful. However, Master Xiao did not care. He would never let Yi Guchen become the young sect master. "Master Xiao, aren't you being a little too forceful? The innate sword embryo is Yi Guchen's. As for the 10,000-year-old fire spirit, it's not impossible to discuss it later." Gu Beihan frowned. "I'm just speaking the truth," Master Xiao said with a cold expression. Yi Guchen looked at Master Xiao and narrowed his eyes. Just as he was about to speak, a sigh came from an elder of Divine Artifact Sect. Everyone looked over and was slightly surprised. "It's the 9th elder of Divine Artifact Sect. What does he mean?" The 9th elder of Divine Artifact Sect was a tall and thin middle-aged man. He looked a little hesitant, but after a long while, he sighed and said, "Master Xiao, it's about time. What can you do even if you admit defeat?" Gu Beihan and the others' eyes flashed at the 9th elder's words. What did he mean? Master Xiao was expressionless, but a cold glint flashed through his eyes. The 9th elder shook his head and sighed when he saw Master Zhao's icy expression. "Back then, you defeated senior brother Duan Tianfeng because of some tricks. Are you going to do it again?" As soon as these words came out, the whole place fell into a dead silence. What did the ninth elder mean by that? Duke Xiao's complexion turned ashen at a speed visible to the naked eye. He said coldly, "Ninth elder, you're speaking nonsense again." "I'm not." The ninth elder exhaled deeply. He suddenly turned to Duan Tianfeng and clasped his hands. "My apologies, senior brother Duan Tianfeng. I feel guilty for what happened back then." "What do you mean?" Duan Tianfeng was a little confused and didn't know how to react. "In truth, Master Xiao was able to defeat you back then because he had me secretly tamper with your forging materials. That's why you lost to him," the ninth elder said apologetically. Everyone in the cauldron froze at the ninth elder's words. Gu Beihan and the others were even more shocked. So that's how it is." Duan Tianfeng's eyes lost focus and his voice trembled. He hadn't lost. Master Xiao had played tricks. "My apologies, senior brother Duan. I only spoke now because I couldn't stand Master Xiao trying to use tricks to influence the selection of the junior sect master," the ninth elder said. What nonsense are you talking about?" Master Xiao's face was as cold as the frost in September. His expression was unprecedentedly ugly and he could no longer maintain his calm. "What, darling Xiao, is what he said true?" Nangong Huajing widened her beautiful eyes in disbelief. She had always thought that Master Xiao had defeated Duan Tianfeng fair and square. That was why she fell in love with him. Now, the ninth elder was saying that Master Xiao had defeated Duan Tianfeng by using tricks. This made Nangong Huajing dizzy. She couldn't believe it. "No, it's not like that." Master Xiao gritted his teeth. He had never thought that the ninth elder would reveal the truth to the public at this moment. "Master Xiao, stop and admit your defeat," the ninth elder said. "No, you're slandering me." "I didn't." Master Xiao's eyes began to turn red. He looked at Nangong Huajing and said, "Huajing, you believe me, right?" Nangong Huajing was in a daze. Her face was pale. She had never seen the shrewd Master Xiao lose his composure like that. The result was obvious. "I even said that it was senior brother Duan's fate to lose to you. Now, the person who was fooled by fate is me." Nangong Huajing smiled with tears in her eyes. The most painful thing in the world was to entrust one's life to the wrong person. Chapter 1368. Back then, Nangong Huajing and Duan Tianfeng had been the closest of brothers and sisters. But Xiao Gongshu had interfered. In the end, the two of them had used the art of forging as a bet to determine the winner. The winner would remain in the divine artifact sect. The loser would lose everything and wander the world. In the end, Duan Tianfeng had lost. Nangong Huajing had thought that Xiao Gongshu had defeated Duan Tianfeng fair and square. But now, after so many years, someone had told her that Xiao Gongshu had defeated Duan Tianfeng through underhanded means. Nangong Huajing couldn't accept this. She seemed to have lost her soul. Xiao Gongshu's hands were trembling. He looked around and found that the elders of the divine artifact sect were looking at him with indifference. Eunuch Zhao's expression was simply a confession without being pressed. Who would have thought that the great Beiyan artifact sovereign Xiao Gongshu would use such a method to defeat Duan Tianfeng? That's right. And here I thought that Xiao Gongshu had defeated Duan Tianfeng fair and square. What right does he have to have such a status? Haha, I think that Xiao Gongshu's reputation will be ruined after this. After all, this method is a little underhanded. Some of the spectators whispered in hushed voices. Now that Xiao Gongshu was present, they didn't dare to say anything openly, but their eyes were full of disdain. One could imagine how bad Xiao Gongshu's reputation would be in the South Horizon region after today. You. Xiao Gongshu's face was ashen when he sensed the disdainful gazes. He glared at Yi Guchen. If Yi Guchen hadn't interfered, Nangong Juyun wouldn't have lost. His past wouldn't have been exposed like this. But now, Xiao Gongshu couldn't do anything to Yi Guchen. He flung his sleeves and turned to leave. But his back was a little hurried and disheveled. Nangong Huajing seemed to be in a daze. Her beautiful eyes turned to Duan Tianfeng, speechless for a moment. It was Xiao Gongshu who'd been deceiving her from the beginning. And the old man in front of her was the one who'd treated her sincerely. Even after so many years, Duan Tianfeng still hadn't forgotten her. As for Nangong Huajing herself, she had been mocking and ridiculing Duan Tianfeng and even advised him to live in seclusion. At this moment, Nangong Huajing's heart was filled with regret. A deep sense of regret spread through her heart. Senior brother Duan? Nangong Huajing's beautiful eyes reddened as she hesitated to speak. Duan Tianfeng wore a complicated look on his face. Did he love Nangong Huajing? Perhaps she used to love him very much. But now, when he saw the mature Nangong Huajing, he suddenly felt a little unfamiliar. Many beautiful things only belonged to the past. Huajing, you don't have to say anything. I won't blame you. Let bygones be bygones. Duan Tianfeng shook his head. When Nangong Huajing heard this, her beautiful face instantly turned pale. She could hear a sense of distance in his words. It was impossible for Mo Tianfeng to be deeply in love with her. When she thought up to hear, Nangong Huajing's delicate figure trembled slightly, and then she turned around and left in a hurry. She was afraid that if she was a step too late, she would not be able to stop her tears from falling. Gu Beihan and the others from Divine Artifact Sect sighed inwardly as they watched Xiao Gongshu and Nangong Huajing leave. Who would have thought that the emotional entanglement between the three of them would end in such a way? Duan Tianfeng was not with Nangong Huajing. After Nangong Huajing learned of Xiao Gongshu's actions, it was clear that he would not be able to peacefully interact with Nangong Huajing. Perhaps this was fate playing tricks on people. Yi Guchen also sighed softly when he saw this. However, this was Duan Tianfeng's matter, so Yi Guchen would not comment on it. How could it be like this? Master? Nangong Jueyun's face was also pale. Even he did not know that his respected master had once done such a despicable thing. Nangong Jueyun's personality was not that of the righteous and upright type, and he was capable of all sorts of schemes. However, he had his own pride in the path of forging. No matter what, he would not use such a despicable method to obtain victory. At this moment, Nangong Jueyun's Dao heart suffered a huge blow. However, in the blink of an eye, he fixed his gaze on Yi Guchen. Other things aside, the position of junior sect master had been lost to him because of Yi Guchen. Nangong Jueyun's hatred for Yi Guchen was obvious. Yi Guchen, I will remember this. See you at Sky Burial Island. Nangong Jueyun put away the cracked yin-yang dual swords and turned to leave with a cold expression. His reputation as the divine weapon young master had been completely tarnished today. The elders of Divine Artifact Sect finally breathed a sigh of relief after Nangong Jueyun left. In the end, Divine Artifact Sect was not controlled by Xiao Gongshu and the Nangong family. Duan Tianfeng, congratulations. Yang Qi and the other elders cupped their hands at Duan Tianfeng. He had won the bet, which meant that his hands and identity would be restored. In truth, the bet was no longer valid the moment the truth was revealed. After all, Xiao Gongshu's victory was obtained through dirty and despicable means. Duan Tianfeng forced a smile, but he couldn't bring himself to be happy. After all, he was completely cut off from the past. Senior Duan Tianfeng, one must look forward. The future is promising. Yi Guchen stepped forward with a faint smile. You're right. It's time to let go. Duan Tianfeng laughed. However, Gu Beihan looked at Yi Guchen and frowned. Yi Guchen, you may have won the junior sect master selection, but you took away Divine Artifact Sect's cornerstone treasure. How should we settle this? It wasn't that Gu Beihan was petty, but that the chaos divine flame of the 10,000-year-old fire spirit was too important to Divine Artifact Sect. Father, can you not be so harsh with your words? Gu Xiangling walked out with light steps and said reproachfully. This. Gu Beihan's expression froze. Was his daughter siding with an outsider? Seeing this, Yi Guchen shook his head and smiled. Don't worry, Sect Master Gu. I naturally wouldn't do such a thing. I have a way to allow Divine Artifact Sect to safely use the Chaos Divine Flame. Gu Beihan, Yang Qi, and the others raised their eyebrows at Yi Guchen's words. Yi Guchen had sealed the 10,000-year-old fire spirit into the sword of begging for defeat. What could he do? Yi Guchen raised his hand, and colorful chaos divine flame immediately rose from the surface of the sword of begging for defeat. Then, a flame seed separated from the flame seed. This is the flame seed of the chaos divine flame. It can also release chaos divine flame without any hidden dangers, Yi Guchen said. His words caused the eyes of many divine artifact sect disciples to light up. They were most worried about being harmed by the chaos divine flame when they came to the sky cauldron forging. Song Feichen, for example, was a very good example. But now, the 10,000-year-old fire spirit had been sealed by Yi Guchen, and they could still safely use the chaos divine flame. Not only was this not a loss for divine artifact sect, but it was also a benefit. Chapter 1369. When Gu Beihan saw this, he was speechless. Losing the 10,000-year-old fire spirit seemed like a huge loss. But in reality, they couldn't subdue the 10,000-year-old fire spirit even if they had it. They could only use the bronze tower to suppress it. And now, the bronze tower had been destroyed. Even if Yi Guchen returned the 10,000-year-old fire spirit to the sect, they couldn't find a good way to contain it. The flame of chaos, on the other hand, had no such worries. It wasn't as violent as the 10,000-year-old fire spirit that would hurt people at the slightest provocation. Therefore, to a certain extent, Yi Guchen had helped Divine Artifact Sect solve a thorny problem. Father, Sir Yi has already shown his sincerity. Besides, we only need the flame of chaos. Gu Xiangling continued to assist. Gu Beihan was speechless. Was this daughter really his biological daughter? Sigh, fine. You can keep the flame of chaos then. Consider it a bargain for you, kid, said Gu Beihan. Aside from the flame of primal chaos, he was also doing this out of respect for forging Tianfeng. Duan Tianfeng was a great southern refiner and an 8-star grandmaster artificer. Now that he could recover his hands, he'd be a big shot again. Divine Artifact Sect couldn't trust Mr. Xiao anymore, so they had an excuse to expel him. They needed someone to replace him. Duan Tianfeng was undoubtedly someone the sect had to rope in. Besides, he was a member of the sect to begin with. Thinking of this, Gu Beihan said to Duan Tianfeng, Duan Tianfeng, I'll find someone to heal your hands. When the time comes, you can stay in Divine Artifact Sect and be an elder with peace of mind. Duan Tianfeng didn't immediately agree when he heard this. He was a member of Divine Artifact Sect in the first place and had feelings for the sect. He would naturally stay in the sect in the future. But before that, Duan Tianfeng had one more thing to do. That's not impossible, but I hope the sect master can agree to one thing, said Duan Tianfeng. What is it? Asked Gu Beihan. Since Yi Guchen has won the final victory, shouldn't the position of junior sect master be decided? Asked Duan Tianfeng. He was fighting for an identity for Yi Guchen. Although his identity as the young sect master of Divine Artifact Sect wasn't enough to intimidate the likes of Starry Universe Sword Pavilion, Heavenly God Sword Sect, Dongfang Family, and Imperial Heaven Sword Pavilion. But at the very least, they would have some misgivings. After all, Divine Artifact Sect's influence wasn't small. Furthermore, these overlords would often purchase materials from the Divine Artifact Sect. This identity would cause the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion and the other powers to hesitate before making a move on him. Gu Beihan was at a loss for words. To be honest, if he could, he wanted to just let this matter slide. After all, as the sect master of the Divine Artifact Sect, he didn't want to get into trouble with Yi Guchen. Although the Overlord forces weren't crazy enough to eliminate Divine Artifact Sect because of this, they would still be in trouble. This matter. Gu Beihan was thinking of how to broach the subject. However, Gu Xiangling said, Father, the final results of the young sect master selection are out. Is there still a need to consider? Moreover, everyone has seen young Master Ye's performance. It can be said that no one is more suitable than him to be the young sect master. Hearing Gu Xiangling's words, the other Divine Artifact Sect disciples echoed her sentiments. After all, Yiguchen had given them the benefit of being able to use the Chaos Divine Flame safely. Yiguchen's lips curled into a smile when he saw this. He'd done a good job building a good relationship with Gu Xiangling. At this moment, the great elder, Yang Qi, stepped forward and said, "Sect leader, I think Yiguchen is qualified to be the young sect leader. Do you think those overlords would go against us just because of Yiguchen? Do you think so as well?" Gu Beihan sighed softly. To be honest, even he was shocked by Yiguchen's talent in smithing. That sort of courting defeat definitely had a chance to evolve into an even stronger weapon in the future. However, she still had her misgivings. Yiguchen's expression was indifferent when he saw this. He didn't ask Gu Beihan to give him the position of young sect master. Instead, he cupped his hands and said, "I've made things difficult for you, sect master. My main goal is to help Senior Tianfeng, not the position of young sect master. Since you've made things difficult for me, I'll take my leave." With that, Yiguchen prepared to leave. "Sir Yi, please don't." Gu Xiangling's expression changed slightly. Gu Beihan's heart skipped a beat when he saw Yiguchen's departing figure. A strange feeling suddenly welled up in his heart. It would be a great loss for Divine Artifact Sect if they gave up on Yiguchen. Gu Beihan didn't know why he had such a thought. However, he still blurted out, "Wait." Yiguchen paused and turned to look at Gu Beihan. "Since you've won the position of young sect master, the position is naturally yours. Our Divine Artifact Sect's reputation is unshakable." Many people were moved by Gu Beihan's words. They hadn't expected Divine Artifact Sect to be so bold as to make Yiguchen their junior sect master. This was practically inviting trouble onto themselves. Even Yiguchen himself raised his eyebrows. He was a little surprised. He did not expect Gu Beihan to have such courage. He wasn't playing hard to get, but he really did want to leave. "Then I thank you, Sect Master Gu." Yiguchen nodded. Since Gu Beihan was willing to make him Divine Artifact Sect's junior sect master, Yiguchen was naturally happy to do so. Having another identity was better than having none at all. Yiguchen breathed a sigh of relief after everything was settled. The matter of the Forging Sky Edge was finally resolved. The Divine Artifact Sect disciples didn't object to this decision in the slightest. After all, they'd seen Yiguchen's performance. He was indeed the best candidate to become junior sect master. As for Song Feichen, he'd long since given up hope. He knew that he couldn't compare to Yiguchen anymore. Suddenly, the Divine Condor rolled his eyes and called out, "Why does Condor Grandpa seem to have heard that the person who becomes junior sect master can marry Miss Gu Xiangling?" The crowd quieted down at his words. The group of people had strange expressions on their faces. Gu Xiangling's face flushed red, like the rosy clouds reflecting the snow. Her beauty was unparalleled. Gu Beihan was taken aback. So Yiguchen hadn't just become junior sect master, he'd also taken away the 10,000-year-old fire spirit. Now, he was even going to kidnap his daughter? Gu Beihan glanced at Gu Xiangling out of the corner of his eye and saw that her head was lowered shyly. She didn't seem to reject the idea. Gu Beihan was a little speechless. When Gu Xiangling had learned that she could marry Nangong Jueyun, she'd rather die than submit. But now, it was Yiguchen's turn to have such an attitude. This was different from person to person, and there was a difference in treatment. Chapter 1370. However, Gu Beihan had already made up his mind about this matter. He could not allow Gu Xiangling and Yiguchen to have a marriage alliance. At least not now. Because Sky Burial Island would be open soon. Everyone in the South Sky region knew about the trouble Yiguchen had caused. Who knew if Gu Xiangling would become a widow in a few months if they were to have a marriage alliance now? Moreover, even if this matter did not happen, Gu Beihan would not agree to it. Because it was too dangerous to be Yiguchen's wife. He could not allow his daughter to be in danger. Just as Gu Beihan was about to find an excuse to decline, Yiguchen spoke first. "Brother Condor, don't joke around. Miss Gu's life should be in her own hands. How can you speak so casually?" Yiguchen shook his head. He naturally did not have any thoughts about Gu Xiangling. Right now, he only had one goal, and that was revenge. Other than that, love and romance had nothing to do with him. No, I didn't. Gu Xiangling wanted to say something but stopped. She was actually slightly anxious. She did not open her mouth to object. Seeing this, the divine condor covered his eyes with his little wings. He shook his head and sighed, "You're hopeless. You're really a man of steel." Gu Beihan smiled faintly. He thought to himself that Yi Guchen was still sensible. He nodded slightly and said, "That's good. After all, they're both young people. There's no need to rush such a big matter in life. Who knows, there might be another chance in the future." However, Gu Xiangling felt a faint sense of disappointment in her heart. She asked herself honestly, if she really allowed Yi Guchen to have a marriage alliance with her, she would not reject it. Instead, she would feel a trace of joy and anticipation. After all, who would not want their husband to be an indomitable man? Yi Guchen could be considered to be a perfect match for the image of a hero in her heart. Unfortunately, Gu Xiangling did not see a trace of interest in Yi Guchen's eyes. At most, they looked at each other like friends. "Very well. Yi Guchen, in a few days, Divine Weapon Sect will hold a ceremony for you as the Junior Sect Master. At that time, you will officially become the Junior Sect Master of Divine Weapon Sect. Not just anyone can provoke you," Gu Beihan said. However, what he meant was that the Starry Sword Pavilion and the other Overlord forces were not nobodies. "Thank you, Sect Leader Gu." Yi Guchen cupped his fists. How could he not know what Gu's mind? However, Yi Guchen didn't think that his status as a young sect master was enough to make Celestial Artifact Sect and Starry Sword Pavilion go against each other. That was unrealistic. It would be enough as long as he could make those factions feel a little apprehensive. The Junior Sect Master selection came to an end in such an unexpected manner. After that, Yi Guchen went into seclusion to adjust his breath. He placed the sword of begging defeat in his dantian to nourish it. It could be said that this sword was already a part of his life. Moreover, Yi Guchen knew that the 100 Calamity Divine Weapon was far from the end of the sword of begging defeat. This was a sword that could cultivate and grow on its own. Yi Guchen had long made up his mind. No matter what price he had to pay, he had to nurture the sword of defeat into an existence comparable to the famed ancient swords. At that moment, the sword of death-seeking was in Yi Guchen's dantian. It had shrunk to the size of a connate sword embryo. It was constantly absorbing the spiritual qi of heaven and earth, and was growing with every passing second. Yi Guchen was also very curious about how powerful this sword would be in the future. In the art of swordsmithing, there is a saying of hiding the sword. Hiding the sword in the body, it is fine if it does not come out, but once it comes out, it will definitely take the enemy's head. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed. He had already decided to nurture the sword of courting defeat in his dantian. For normal battles, he would use the 9-Dragon Thunder Prison. When he really needed to use his full strength, he would directly use the sword of courting defeat. The power of this sword strike was earth-shattering, because it was the energy that had been accumulated for a long time. When it was released all at once, it was equivalent to an explosion of energy after accumulation. Its power was naturally different from ordinary sword moves. "Another trump card," Yi Guchen murmured. This meant that he was one step closer to killing Di Haotian with his own hands. After such a long delay in Heavenly Craftsmanship City, Burial Island is about to open. Yi Guchen took a deep breath. The real decisive battle was about to come. A few days later, the artifact sect was decorated with lanterns and streamers. A grand banquet was held for Yi Guchen's ascension to the position of Junior Sect Master. It was believed that in a few days, the news that Yi Guchen had become the Junior Sect Master of the Artifact Sect would spread from Heavenly Craftsmanship City to the entire South Horizon region. By then, countless people would be amazed by Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen had never liked this kind of banquet. After casually dealing with the guests, he went to a secluded courtyard to rest alone. A beautiful girl was leaning against a willow tree. She seemed to be in a daze, thinking about something. Suddenly, she saw Yi Guchen. "Young Master, Miss Gu." Yi Guchen smiled. This girl was Gu Xiangling. She was like a girl who had walked out of a painting. She was elegant and refined. Her face was like a painting. Yi Guchen had seen many girls, but it was rare to see a girl with such an outstanding temperament like Gu Xiangling. It seems that young Master Yi is also a person who likes peace and quiet. Gu Xiangling smiled. Yi Guchen nodded slightly. He didn't know what to say. Xiangling still has to thank young Master Yi. Otherwise, the current me would very likely be in deep trouble, said Gu Xiangling. Actually, I was just doing it for myself. Yi Guchen said. Young Master Yi, are you leaving? Gu Xiangling suddenly asked. That's right. It's close to the opening of Sky Burial Island. I have to make preparations first. Yi Guchen said. Can we meet again in the future? Gu Xiangling suddenly said. She didn't dare to look directly at Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen was stunned. However, he wasn't a fool. Although he was a little stubborn, how could he not understand Gu Xiangling's thoughts? However, sometimes, it was best not to say it out loud. Of course, I'm the young sect master of Divine Artifact Sect. We'll meet again in the future. Yi Guchen shook his head and smiled. Gu Xiangling blushed. She wanted to say something but couldn't. She also vaguely felt that someone had already occupied a place in Yi Guchen's heart. The two of them were silent. On the other side, Nangong Huajing was preparing to return to the Nangong family with Nangong Juun. The plan this time was a complete failure. Nangong Huajing felt empty in her heart. She had already decided to break up with Xiao Gongshu. Nangong Juayun, on the other hand, was like a frosted eggplant. He no longer had his usual strategizing. His eyes were cold and filled with unwillingness. Sky Burial Island, Yi Guchen. This matter isn't over yet. Nangong Juayun muttered to himself. In a spacious hall, Xiao Gongshu's eyes were bloodshot, and he looked like a gloomy beast. Yi Guchen, it's all because of him. Xiao Gongshu took a deep breath. Then he took out a pitch-black jade slip and crushed it. In less than 15 minutes. A slightly aged cackle could be heard. Xiao Gongshu, you still used this favor in the end. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.